Hey guys, tonight we're scrubbing off the rose-tinted myths of Victorian cleanliness and diving face first into the filth. Because hygiene in the 19th century wasn't so much a routine as it was an ongoing crisis in lace and soot. So if you've ever thought, ugh, I need a shower, imagine living in a time where that statement made you suspicious, scandalous, or dead. Before you start compulsively scratching, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of gently horrifying bedtime content. Let me know in the comments what time it is for you, and whether you're watching this from a bed, a bath, or a panic room. It's always nice to know who's suffering through history with me. Dim the lights, maybe light a candle, Victorian vibes, and let the distant hum of indoor plumbing lull you into smug gratitude. Let's travel back to a time when deodorant was a rumour and privacy was a luxury. Welcome to Hygiene, the Victorian way. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the Victorian era, sometime around 1850. The good news, you're not immediately dead. The bad news? You're about to be introduced to hygiene practices that make a sewer rat look like it has a skincare routine. You blink awake in a room that smells like mould's more ambitious cousin. The wallpaper is peeling, the air is damp, and the smell wafting in from the cracked window is equal parts horse droppings, coal smoke, and something you hope is cabbage, but fear is your neighbour. There is no Febreze. There is no ventilation. There is only this, a cosy box of decay with woodworm in the walls and a suspicious stain in the ceiling that's either water damage or the ghost of last week's laundry. You sit up in bed, and by bed I mean a pile of sagging horsehair, rusted springs, and old fabric that's been compressed into geological strata of dead skin, soot, and the kind of mites that would need their own sensors. Your sheets, stiff with grime. The pillow, lumpy, sour-smelling, and shared, either with another person, a family of lice, or both. You don't own pyjamas. Pyjamas are a luxury. You slept in your underclothes, or more likely, your regular clothes. You do this not out of laziness, but necessity. Undressing fully in winter could lead to frostbite, hypothermia, or, if you're renting a cold water flat in London, death by damp wallpaper. So you sleep clothed, wrapped in thin blankets and quiet desperation. Your name? Doesn't matter. You're one of many. You could be a chimney sweep, a laundress, a match girl, or some other Dickensian stereotype that exists primarily to suffer. You weren't born into a world of hot water taps and shampoo bottles. You were born into soot, sweat, and smells that science still hasn't classified. You're not here to thrive. You're here to endure, and occasionally scrub your feet with cold water and mild terror. Your parents probably named you after a monarch or a religious figure. But socially, you're known as that one with the rash, or him who smells of fish. Identity in the Victorian era is largely defined by what you do, what you earn, and what you haven't washed in a while. You may own a single mirror, but you rarely look into it. Not because you're vain, but because what stares back at you is the Victorian version of a haunted house. You don't own perfume. You don't even know what deodorant is. If you're feeling fancy, you might dab vinegar on your armpits. Otherwise, you rely on luck, denial, and layers of fabric to mask the bodily orchestra playing beneath your corset or suspenders. And about that body, it's not a temple. It's a project site that's been abandoned due to budget cuts and industrial smoke. Your skin itches. Your scalp is flaky. Your breath could wilt wallpaper. And your feet? Well, let's not talk about your feet. They've been stewing in the same pair of socks since the Crimean War. Welcome to your Victorian self. You're not just a person. You're a walking archive of filth, infection, and creative suffering. You rise, slowly. Every joint creaks, not from age, but from damp. You slept beside your siblings, or your spouse, or in some cases all of them at once. Privacy is a myth. Space is theoretical. Bedrooms are for sleeping, coughing, and repressing trauma. If you want solitude, you'll need to rent it by the minute from the man down the street who owns the coal shed. Your mouth is dry. Possibly because of the coal dust you inhaled in your sleep. Possibly because someone boiled cabbage 6 buildings over, and the smell drifted in and assassinated your will to live. You try to swallow. The taste is metallic. It could be blood, or it could just be Victorian tap water, unfiltered, unregulated, and spiritually aggressive. If you're upper class, your life is slightly better, but only in the way a larger coffin is better than a small one. You might have a servant who brings you a wash basin with lukewarm water and a sliver of soap carved from whale fat. You might even have your own chamber pot, which makes you royalty in the land of hygienic horror. But even the wealthy aren't immune to the time period. You still bathe infrequently, powder your armpits with lead, and treat syphilis with mercury. Progress is subjective. If you're poor, and statistically you are, you don't bathe because there's no tub, no time, and no patience. Soap costs money. Hot water requires effort. And if you're lucky enough to use a public bathhouse, be prepared to share your rinse with 15 strangers, 300 pubic hairs sore, and a floating memory of regret. People in this era don't bathe daily. They don't bathe weekly. In fact, bathing too often is seen as suspicious, untrustworthy, even dangerous. Doctors warn that too much water opens the pores and lets disease in, which is ironic because not bathing guarantees that disease never has to wait for an invitation. You were born dirty, you'll die dirty, and in between you might wipe your face with a damp rag once every 3 days and call it self-care. That's Victorian hygiene, a perpetual cycle of effort, odour, and self-delusion. You move toward your basin. It's enamel, chipped, and probably haunted. You pour some lukewarm water from a jug and splash your face. The water is grey before it even touches your skin. You dab gently, because the cold stings, and you're still half asleep. Congratulations, that was your bath. You are now clean by Victorian standards, which is to say, marginally less diseased than yesterday. Toothbrush? If you have one, it's shared. Toothpaste is a gritty mix of chalk, soot, and crushed shells. Your gums bleed, your teeth wobble. You smile less out of joy and more out of strategic social ambiguity. No one wants to see what's happening behind those lips. Not even God. You might rinse your mouth with vinegar, or whiskey, or nothing. Mouthwash doesn't exist. Oral hygiene is a punishment ritual. Children are taught to scrub with burnt bread. Adults chew mint leaves and pray no one notices the green bits stuck between their front teeth. Hair? You don't wash it, you manage it. Combing is an act of war. Each tug brings tears. Each stroke reveals another stowaway louse. You wear a bonnet, a hat, or a stoic expression? Shampoo won't be invented properly for decades. Until then, it's all about dry brushing and pretending you meant to look like that. And still, you leave the house. You step into the world as a human-shaped storm of musk, mildew, and resignation. Because in the Victorian era, hygiene isn't about being clean. It's about being clean enough to not collapse. You step out of your front door, or what passes for a door. It's warped from damp, doesn't quite close, and has seen more rats than you have friends. The street greets you with the kind of smell that makes your eyes water before your brain can form a protest. Rotten fish, animal manure, soot, old beer, and the sweet, sinister stench of open sewage bubbling somewhere just out of view. This is your morning air. This is your new clean. The pavement underfoot is a suggestion at best. Mud, manure, and yesterday's chamber pot contents create a thick sludge that grabs at your boots with each step. Assuming you have boots, many don't. If you're unlucky or a child, which is basically the same thing, you're barefoot, navigating a minefield of nails, horse droppings, and the occasional dead bird. If your foot gets infected, that's fine. Victorian medicine has just the thing. It's called amputation without anaesthetic. You pass neighbours who smell no better than you, and some who smell worse. A man coughs so violently his hat nearly falls off. A woman wrings out a rag in brown water and wipes down her child's face, leaving it dirtier than before. A boy picks something unidentifiable off the street and pockets it, possibly for dinner. No one blinks, no one comments. In Victorian society, your filth is your business, unless it becomes everyone else's business. Then it's a moral failing. At this point, you might be wondering, was it really this bad? Didn't anyone try to be clean? Oh, they tried. They just failed. Spectacularly. Let's take a moment to talk about soap. Modern soap comes in pastel colours, smells like citrus or ocean breeze, and promises to exfoliate and hydrate. Victorian soap is a grey, foul-smelling brick made of rendered animal fat and industrial-grade lye. It doesn't lava. It doesn't sparkle. It removes dirt by sheer chemical aggression, and it might take a layer of skin with it. People use it sparingly, partly because it stings, and partly because it's expensive. Some make their own, boiling down animal fat in their kitchens, while their toddlers play beside the cauldron. If you're rich, you might own lavender-scented bars imported from France. If you're not, you're scrubbing your armpits with lard and prayers. And speaking of armpits, deodorant, as a concept, is still decades away. People try alternatives. They shove dried flowers into their sleeves. They dab cologne under their arms. They shove cotton soaked in vinegar into their bodices. Nothing works. You smell like what you are. A living organism wrapped in wool and stress, leaking sweat into every fibre of your clothing. Let's talk clothing. In the Victorian era, your clothes are not just what you wear. They're where your bacteria live. You own, at most, 2 outfits. One for daily use, one for special occasions, which includes weddings, funerals, and maybe Sunday church. Your underclothes, if you're lucky enough to have them, are made of stiff linen that scratches like medieval wool and absorbs every bodily fluid known to man. You do not change them daily. You do not change them weekly. You change them when your conscience, or the smell, or a vomiting relative demands it. Washing clothes is a full-body workout. It requires a tub, a mangle, soap, boiling water, and arms that haven't already fallen off from labour. For the poor, laundry day is less a chore and more a trauma. You drag your clothing to the public wash house, scrub it against a board until your knuckles bleed, wring it out, and pray the foggy London air doesn't rain down soot while it dries. If it's winter, the clothes freeze before they dry. If it's summer, they bake into stiff, crunchy sculptures of shame. You don't own a wardrobe. Clothes are folded, piled or hung on pegs beside the fireplace, absorbing smoke like a fabric sponge. When you wear them, you carry that smoke into the world. And that smoke carries something else. The stench of human existence, unfiltered and proud. Let's return to your head. Victorian hairstyles are elaborate, but don't let the curls and pomade fool you. That updo? It's hiding a lice convention. That powdered wig? It's not just fashion, it's camouflage. Hair is rarely washed, sometimes not even monthly. Instead it's brushed vigorously, scented with rose oil, and occasionally dusted with starch. The starch clumps. The oil turns rancid. And before long, your scalp is a buffet for lice, nits, and any other insect that fancies a challenge. Lice were so common that metal combs designed just to rip them out were standard household items. Entire families would sit by candlelight, grooming each other like Victorian chimps. Some burned their hair. Others shaved it off entirely, particularly children, who are both more lice-prone and less able to complain. But lice weren't even the worst. Fleas carried typhus. Bedbugs nested in the cracks of headboards and fed on you nightly. And if you ever found yourself too clean, too free of pests, congratulations. People might suspect you of being French, or worse, untrustworthy. Cleanliness was not just rare, it was suspicious. The cleaner you appeared, the more you had to explain yourself. Were you trying to seduce someone? Were you a socialist? Had you been abroad? Better to be grimy and respectable than fresh and morally unstable. It's time to talk about the bath. Not metaphorically, literally. The bath. Singular. Because most people didn't own one. If you were lucky, you had a tin tub, stored in the kitchen, hauled out once a week, filled with boiled water from the stove. The whole family used it, one after the other. Father first, then mother, then children by age, and finally the baby, who bathed in a broth of everyone else's filth. The water was never changed, only topped up. If you were last in line, you weren't bathing. You were being steeped like a tragic teabag. Public bathhouses existed, but they were expensive and slightly scandalous. Some were respectable. Most were not. They were places where hygiene met gossip, met syphilis, met scandal. If you went, you had to pretend it was for your health, not your soul. And yet, despite all this effort, you're still dirty. Your hands are black with soot. Your nails are filled with grime. Your body harbours an ecosystem so diverse it should be studied. You try to wipe yourself clean with a rag that hasn't been washed since last year. You spit into it, rub your face, congratulate yourself. You are now presentable. Let's not forget the nose. Or more specifically, the things you shove into it. The streets reek, and Victorian noses are delicate. So people walk around with handkerchiefs pressed to their faces, doused in perfume or camphor. Some carry smelling salts, ostensibly for fainting, but really to overpower the smell of the dead cat rotting behind the bakers. Upper-class women wore tiny vials of vinegar around their necks. They'd sniff them delicately to mask the ever-present stench of humanity. If that didn't work, they'd retreat indoors and write about their headaches in their diaries. Or worse, take laudanum and nap through the worst of it. Children, they're worse off. They roll in the muck, track in filth, and are rarely cleaned unless something is visibly crusting. Their hair is cut short, their face is always streaked, and when they cry from the soap stinging their eyes, they're told it builds character. You are by now fully Victorian. You stink, you itch, you ache, you exist. And somehow, against all odds, you still think maybe you're getting by, but you're not. Not really, you've just adapted. You've learned to ignore the smell, to accept the itching, to normalise the layer of grime that covers everything from your scalp to your soul. This isn't hygiene, it's survival, it's identity. You've made it out the door. You're walking the streets of Victorian England, wearing yesterday's sweat, the city's dust, and a smell that's become so normal you only notice it when someone else smells slightly worse. You don't think of yourself as dirty. You think of yourself as functional. The same way a soot-covered chimney is technically functional. It still draws air. It also occasionally collapses. The idea of clean has been redefined here. It doesn't mean fresh or sterile. It means has not offended anyone important yet. As long as you're not actively leaking or trailing visible slime, you're doing just fine. But deep down, under your layers of matted hair and denial, a quiet part of you remembers what comfort once felt like. Maybe a vague, generational whisper from a time before your time. Warm water, private space, the quiet satisfaction of not constantly feeling like you've been coated in sadness gravy, but you bury that thought. This is your life now. The idea of being truly clean has faded into fantasy, fairy tale stuff, like dragons or fresh milk. You pass a butcher's stall. Raw meat is hanging from rusty hooks, flanked by flies so thick they move like a liquid. Blood pools in the gutters and mixes with rain. You step around it and pretend it's just water. It's never just water. In Victorian London, water is a gamble you rarely win. You pass a baker's window. The warmth from the oven hits your face, and for a moment feels almost cleansing. Then the smell hits you, yeast, burnt flour, and the unmistakable tang of sweat from a man who hasn't seen a bathtub since the Reform Act. You glance down an alley. A child is relieving himself beside a sleeping dog. A woman dumps a bucket of something into the street. The liquid splashes onto the cobblestones with a sound that suggests a combination of broth, rot, and someone's personal regrets. You keep walking. Everyone keeps walking, because that's what you do here. You don't stop. You don't linger. You don't question it. You just move through the grime like it's weather. Even indoors, the illusion of cleanliness is paper thin. Your workplace, maybe a factory, maybe a seamstress's loft, is thick with the smell of old bodies and machine oil. The windows are glazed with soot from nearby chimneys. The floors haven't seen a mop in weeks. Dust clings to every surface. And the air, despite being technically inside, still manages to feel damp, heavy, and hostile. You may work near an open flame. You may work in silence. You may work with the gentle sound of someone coughing up blood in the background. But you will work. And you will sweat. And you will do it in clothes already soaked with the ghosts of 100 other work days. At some point in the day, you may wipe your hands on a cloth. Not a towel, a cloth. Something vaguely brown, vaguely damp, possibly older than you. It doesn't dry so much as relocate the moisture to new and exciting parts of your body. There's no such thing as hand sanitizer. There's no such thing as antibacterial anything. Most people don't even know germs exist. The very idea that invisible creatures could be crawling across your skin, into your eyes, under your fingernails, that's madness. Unscientific. Ridiculous. Except it's also true. And they're winning. By late afternoon the heat begins to rise. Heat, the layers you wear, because modesty demands it, are now clinging to you like wet cardboard. Sweat forms under your arms, between your thighs, behind your knees. You itch, but scratching only makes it worse. Your corset is digging into your ribs. Your shirt collar is crusted with salt. There are no sanitary pads, no deodorant, no breathable fabric. Only chafing. Only discomfort. Only the grim, sticky truth of Victorian hygiene. Nobody is safe, not even the Queen. You've heard rumours that Her Majesty takes sponge baths, that her linens are changed daily, that her staff empties her chamber pot before it's full. You can't confirm any of this, but it makes you angry anyway. Not because you resent her, well, maybe a little, but because you can't even imagine living that clean. What would it be like to own a fresh towel? To bathe with warm water? To brush your teeth with something that doesn't taste like wood ash and despair? It's too much, too fanciful. So you stop thinking about it. You stop thinking, period, because that's the trick to surviving here. You narrow your focus, you shrink your expectations. You stop dreaming about cleanliness and start redefining it. You sniff your armpit, not good, but not the worst it's been. You wipe your face. The rag sticks briefly to your cheek before peeling away with a sigh. You drink water. It's murky. You don't ask why. You relieve yourself in a public toilet that's more whole than anything else, with no door and a view of someone's knees. You go on because there is no alternative. You are a Victorian human, and you are not supposed to be comfortable. Your comfort is not the point. Your comfort doesn't even exist. Cleanliness is a private luxury, a whispered rumour, a thing people talk about wistfully before plunging their hands into a chamber pot and continuing their day. And when the day finally ends, after the labour, the smells, the invisible bacteria parties on every surface, you return home. You peel off your outer layers with the care of a man disarming a bear trap. Your underclothes cling to you like trauma. You lie down in the same bed, on the same mattress, under the same gritty blanket. The sheets haven't been changed since before the last solar eclipse. You don't care. Your body is tired. Your skin is alive in the wrong way. You close your eyes and sleep, not because you're rested, but because unconsciousness is the only way to ignore the way your thighs are currently fusing to themselves. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and do it again. The same routine, the same rags, the same quiet ache of a life spent never fully clean. And that, dear listener, is who you are now. Not a name, not a dream, but a collection of limbs and laundry in the world's most elaborate dirt simulation. You think you know a city because you once saw a tidy engraving in a history book. Neat rows of terraces, smudgy horse cabs trundling past top-hatted silhouettes. Maybe a river that glitters heroically under a Turner sunset. Forget that illustration. Reality in the middle years of Queen Victoria's reign is not picturesque. It is all texture. Grease on brick, soot on air, slime on granite steps. Buildings lean like drunks who can't find their feet. Every wall blackened by the coal that never stops burning. If the wind shifts, you glimpse original brickwork, a dusty red that feels almost scandalous, like someone lifting their petticoat in a Methodist chapel. From street level, however, everything is the same hard charcoal. You could blindfold a man, spin him twice, set him anywhere between Whitechapel and Southwark, and he would swear you had moved him nowhere at all, because the taste of smoke on his tongue tells him the landscape hasn't changed. Walk in early morning when fog shoulders its way between buildings, and you meet the first unavoidable fact of Victorian existence. The atmosphere is alive, but not with anything wholesome. Chimney pots belch black fury from dawn until whatever our night watchman managed to prod the last furnace into submission. Those pots are meant to stand straight, but half of them tilt crazily, patched with soot slabs and wired together by men paid a penny per perilous clamour. Every gust scours brickwork and deposits the shavings on your coat, your hair, the crust of your breakfast bread. By noon, you have inhaled enough particulate to refurbish a small coal scuttle. By nightfall, your handkerchief, when you cough into it, looks like something excavated from Pompeii. Children play counting games to see who can spit darkest. The winner may well be tubercular, though nobody yet bothers with that vocabulary. Around here, blood is just another bodily fluid to wipe on a sleeve. Between tenements flow alleys barely shoulder wide, cobbles broken into 2V ridges. Water never drains because the city fathers designed the gutters as an afterthought, and anyway, they are forever jammed with straw, potatoes, bits of quivering offal dropped by the butcher's boy. Puddles form permanent colonies, grey in spring, green in summer, treacherous black come deepest winter. You step round them if you can, splash through if you must, swear always, because the liquid has a way of leaping higher than your boots and soaking stockings that will not be washed until Saturday fortnight. Don't look closely. Sometimes there is movement under the surface. Eels, perhaps. Perhaps something with legs that should not possess legs. The stench is sweeter than you expect, almost floral when the sun hits just right. And that sweetness is worse than outright rot because it tricks the brain into one optimistic inhale before reality clamps fists round your lungs. Noise is everywhere. Iron wheels over stone, wagon axles shrieking for grease, costermongers howling their wares in accents so mangled they sound like caricatures of themselves. Add the factory bell that strikes not politely but with accusation, reminding late workers that fines await. Church bells chime as well, yet their holy drone is lost among steam whistles that erupt each hour to summon another shift of exhausted hands. Layered beneath the mechanical chorus comes a subtler soundtrack. The hiss of gas lamps, damp wood popping in kitchen grates, rats clicking claws along attic beams. Even at 2 a.m, the city refuses stillness. Lamplighters shuffle, night soilmen trundle carts of human waste toward the river, drunks debate metaphysics and vomiting order in alley mouths. Silence would feel indecent, a betrayal of everything you have come to accept as normal. Inside dwellings, existence turns compact and vertical. Rooms stack one on top of another until houses resemble wardrobes stuffed with human clothing. Ceilings sag under the weight of the floor above. Sometimes plaster cracks at midnight, dropping calcified snow onto whoever sleeps below. You want to complain, but the landlord's agent visits only to collect rent, never repairs. He has mastered a smile that suggests your misery is a personal hobby he would rather not interrupt. Sharing walls means sharing every intimate sound. A baby's colic shriek, a couple's whispered reconciliation after shouting, the rasp of a grandfather whose lungs fill slowly with industrial dust, yet who still rises at 5 to hawk newspapers. Privacy is rationed, measured in seconds stolen behind privy doors that do not lock, and in the minuscule relief found when the street organ starts up out front, its tinny tune briefly drowning your own internal monologue. Illumination is supposed to civilize, but gaslight only gilds grime. Inside parlours, flame dances behind a milky globe and breathes out fumes that sting eyes already raw from coal. Curtains hang heavy with residue. If you run a finger along the hem, it comes away black, and somewhere a chemist has written a paper about this residue, calling it sootful. Yet nobody outside the Royal Institution will read him. Books absorb odour too. Pages warping into grey wafers that smell permanently of engine rooms. You leaf through Dickens by lamplight and wonder whether Oliver Twist coughed as much as you do. Later, you discover flecks of ash lodged in the binding like tiny disappointed punctuation marks. Food shares quarters with filth. Most cooking takes place over one grate. When the fire dims, someone stoops to blow on the embers, scattering ash across the stew. Nobody notices. Pepper is expensive, and ash does almost the same teasing trick on the tongue. Water for boiling must be hauled from the pump down the street. The pail's rim rubs a bruise into your palm, but you keep walking because if you dawdle, neighbours cut the queue, and by the time your turn returns, the pump handle may wheeze nothing but sludge. At home you strain the water through muslin, if you have it, or through your apron if you do not. Something always escapes the weave. A twig, a beetle, a fragment of something softer that dissolves before you can identify it. Beyond the city core, the scenery promises relief, yet rarely delivers. Canals gleam blue on maps, brown in reality. Barges plough through carrying coal and corpses of drowned dogs alike. Country lanes become mud trenches once the rains start. A season Londoners swear lasts 14 months a year. You walk anyway because the doctor's surgery is 3 miles along that lane, and your youngest wheezes like a broken harmonium. On the journey you pass hedges flecked white where factory smoke has bleached the leaves, and pastures where cows chew contentedly despite looking as if someone sprinkled them with powdered charcoal. Their milk smells faintly of firegrate. Nobody notices until someone from the Society for the Encouragement of Health drinks a cup and writes a pamphlet about spontaneous milk-borne cholera. The pamphlet circulates until the next crisis replaces it. Even recreation tastes of contamination. The music hall is packed nightly, air thick with pipe smoke and beer vapour. You laugh at bawdy songs, you cheer when the acrobat lands her final flip. But halfway through the comedian's monologue, someone faints in the balcony and is carried out gasping for clear air that does not exist. In the galleries of South Kensington, the paintings look dull under shrouds of dust. Guards flick feathers at frames in vain. Outside the Crystal Palace, mighty panes of glass trap every swirling mote so visitors wander among palm trees in a climate of trapped exhalations. When it rains, the city seems to sigh. Streets shine, gutters surge, everything turns reflective. But the reflection is warped like mercury glass. Drops drum on roofs and instantly darken to ink. Downspouts disgorge sudden torrents that smell of privies and brewery vats combined. Children stomp puddles until a horse cart splashes them head to toe. They shriek with laughter because filth is familiar, almost comforting. Adults hunch in doorways, tip in hats against the downpour, pretending their shoes aren't already sloshing. Nightfall should bring cleansing darkness, yet gas lamps smear orange halos across the fog, revealing rather than hiding. Shadows lengthen, but never fully conceal the smear on the butcher's wall, the smear on the constable's sleeve, the smear on your own soul after another day breathing air so compromised it might as well have teeth. You close your eyes and still see the mottled glow, because eyelids are no match for a century intent on branding itself on retinas. Somewhere, people speak of progress. They mention new sewer systems, glass-roofed arcades, parks funded by philanthropists. They crow over statistics. Mortality down this year, cholera at bay, infant survival edging upward. You hope they're right, though you've yet to meet anyone who feels rescued. Your neighbour still tosses chamber pot contents from a third-floor window at dawn. The splash echoes like applause. The baker still wheezes black when he laughs. The barmaid at the Lamb and Flag scratches lice beneath her curls between pulling pints. Perhaps improvement marches, but it wears soft shoes and leaves no footprints you can see. You share a final fact with everyone else inhabiting this urban stomach. There is nowhere else to go. The countryside starves, colonies are across oceans, and tickets to Australia cost 2 years' wages. So you remain in a district that chews up days and spits out nights, learning to navigate grime the way sailors read stars. You know the hour by the angle of shadow on soot. You judge weather by the taste of smoke on your tongue. You recognise neighbours not by faces, those are hidden under coal dust and worry, but by silhouettes against lamplight and the rhythms of their coughs echoing through walls. This is your ecosystem, not a backdrop, but a living antagonist. Streets try to trip you. Air tries to drown you slowly. Water tries to negotiate an inside route through your organs. Still you wake, you walk, you work. You learn to carry a scrap of rag soaked in vinegar to breathe through when the stink erupts. You learn to skim the grey crust off yesterday's stew and call what remains nutritious. You learn to fall asleep counting the cracks in the ceiling, not sheep, because sheep would never survive here, and the ceiling at least is reliable. Its cracks only deepen, never vanish. And when you dream, you do not dream of Paris boulevards or alpine meadows. You dream of quiet, of air that feels like nothing at all, of water that tastes of nothing, of silence so complete you can hear your own pulse without coughing first. Then morning arrives with its usual grey fanfare, and you tuck that dream behind your ribs where it won't be stolen, and you step once more into the street that gnaws on souls, ready to be swallowed whole by another imperial day. The next morning, nothing has changed, because nothing is supposed to. Change is something for pamphlets and politicians, not for streets like yours. Your boots are still wet from yesterday. Your coat smells like a furnace that gave up. Your lungs, they've taken on that faint wheeze that everyone eventually gets. The one that means you've either adapted to the air or surrendered to it. You step out again. The fog is still here, curling in corners, lurking in window frames, slinking around chimneys like it owns the place. It does. It always has. You see shapes through it, not people. Faces are vague. Everyone looks like a tired ghost. Sometimes you think you've recognised someone, but by the time you've turned to wave, the shape has already melted back into the soot. Everything outside is covered in a fine, dark film. Windowsills, lampposts, your teeth. The world is matte black, even in daylight. Only the horse dung glistens. Carriages roll past with the urgency of money, throwing slop onto the hem of your coat, while their passengers look out with vague contempt, the kind that only the wealthy can afford when their underpants are laundered weekly by someone else. And then there's the sound of the city, deep, mechanical, unceasing. Not just noise, but something more. A persistent industrial growl beneath everything. Factories pulse like monstrous hearts. Their pistons hiss and clank through brick walls, their gears screeching with labour. The textile mills sound like breathing, rasping, rhythmic, slightly off. You can't hear your own thoughts, but you don't need to. They haven't changed since last week or last month. Survival, work, water, food, hope, if you dare. It's not that people don't care, it's that they've stopped pretending to. The air has opinions now. You cough them out daily, a kind of democratised suffering. The poor wheeze in tenements, the middle class cough into handkerchiefs, and the upper crust die of consumption in drawing rooms filled with imported carpets and potted ferns. Same lungs, different curtains. Back alleys host their own geography. You know which ones always smell like cabbage, and which ones are warm in winter because a bakery's oven bleeds heat through the bricks. Some are always wet, some always echo, some make you feel watched. You don't use those unless you're desperate. Even in a city this broken, there are places where the light doesn't bother trying. You see the river again as you cross the bridge to work. The Thames is less river now, more evidence. A thick, brown soup of filth, waste, and dead things that bob along politely, like they're queuing for burial. The city flushes its sins into the water, and hopes no one looks too closely. Fish are a rare sight, the smell is not. It rises in waves, sweet and raw, like rotten meat in a perfume bottle. In summer, it's worse. In winter, it freezes just enough to trap things in the ice. Things that look back at you, if you stare too long. There are dead zones too. Places no one lives. Not officially. Burned out shells of buildings, half collapsed, windows gaping like sockets in a skull. Children play there. Rats live there. Sometimes you hear music inside, faint and sad, like someone trying to remember what joy used to sound like. No one intervenes. The city has learned to ignore the parts of itself that are too hard to fix. Your building, like most, wasn't built for comfort. It was built for stacking. People above you, below you, beside you. Their lives press in on yours. You hear them scratching, coughing, fighting, muttering in their sleep. The walls are paper thin. You know your neighbour's habits better than your own. You've heard a man weep through the wall every night for a year, and still haven't asked him why. That's not cruelty. That's etiquette. Inside, mould creeps silently. Behind the skirting boards, under your mattress, along the beams in the ceiling. It grows without sunlight, without shame. You tried scrubbing it once, but it came back, angrier. You let it be now. Mould is just another tenant. You hope it never learns to speak. The furniture is borrowed, bought second hand, or built by someone who doesn't love you. The chair wobbles. The table leans. Your mattress sags in the middle like it's trying to consume you. You sleep curled to one side, always the same side, so your spine has started to curve to match the dip. You think about flipping the mattress, but know it won't help. The underside has its own damp smell, like boiled cloth and abandonment. Your only luxury is a mirror cracked across the bottom corner. You avoid it. On good days, it tells you nothing. On bad days, it tells the truth. If you work near machines, you return home smelling of hot iron and oil. If you work near dyes, your hands are purple, blue, or jaundice yellow, and your fingernails are stained so permanently that people stop asking what happened. If you work with meat, the stench follows you into dreams. If you work with death, undertaking, hospital work, sewage, you stop noticing smell at all. You just know when the air feels heavier, and then there's the light. Gaslight is everywhere now. It flickers in shops, theatres, even some homes if you're lucky or upper middle. It burns with a sallow glow, not bright, just enough to cast shadows deeper. It makes every face look sick. At night, the fog turns the light into halos. You walk through them like a lost prophet with coal dust in his beard. They don't comfort, they just reveal. Clothes covered in soot, eyes rimmed with red, blood on a collar that someone forgot to wash out. Outside the gasworks, the air changes, thicker, oily, chemical. You feel it coat your teeth. It settles in your eyelashes. Sometimes you blink and swear you hear it crackle. Workers here lose their sense of taste first, then balance, then their jobs. You don't ask questions. You keep your mouth shut, literally. Public buildings try. The post office scrubs its floors weekly. The new library smells like old books and mild ambition. But the grime always finds a way in. On boots, on breath. Even the doorknobs carry a kind of persistent film, like they've been handled by guilt. And always there's the rain, not the romantic kind. This rain has a mission. It doesn't fall, it seeps. It crawls down walls, it drips through chimneys. It finds cracks in boots, in roofs, in your optimism. There are months where the city never truly dries. Clothes are always damp. Skin is always clammy. Papers curl at the edges before you can read them. Entire lifetimes dissolve in the drizzle. People joke about the weather. They joke because if they didn't, they'd scream. Nice day for ducks, they say, nodding through soaked hats and squelching soles. Keeps the air clean, someone says, ignoring the fact that the air smells like a boiled rat that tried to be a candle and failed. You try not to think about how much of your own life is devoted to avoiding water, managing moisture, or pretending that the leak above your bed isn't slowly evolving into a second bed, one that waits patiently above you, gathering strength. You sleep with a bucket next to your pillow. You sleep light. The city doesn't make room for weakness. Children adapt or die. Adults bend or snap. The elderly simply disappear. Sometimes people go missing, and no one notices until the rent goes unpaid. Then a landlord knocks once, shrugs, and lets the next family move in without clearing the bed. There's a phrase for it. Someone else's problem is the most Victorian expression you know. And yet, in all of this filth, life persists. People still hang flowers in cracked mugs. Someone paints shutters blue, even if the paint peels by Thursday. Children draw in the ash on windows. They draw suns. They draw animals they've never seen. They draw clean rivers, because the idea has to come from somewhere. You begin to wonder if the grime is the point. Not just a byproduct, but a feature. A glue. It binds people together. In silence. In shared coughs. In the grim nod exchanged between strangers who both saw something in the alley and agreed, wordlessly, to forget it. Tomorrow you'll walk the same streets. You'll step over the same puddles. You'll dodge the same stairs. The city won't change. But maybe, for a brief moment, you'll pass a bakery where the smell of fresh bread overpowers the smell of rot. Maybe you'll see someone laugh loud enough to drown out the machines. Maybe the fog will lift just long enough for a sunbeam to touch your cheek like it remembers your name. And maybe, just maybe, that'll be enough to keep going. When evening comes, you might think the city would rest. But cities like this don't sleep. They contract. They tighten. They settle into something even darker, even smaller. Night in the Victorian world isn't a peaceful descent. It's an exposure. The gas lamps flicker to life, not to illuminate, but to accuse. Their glow is jaundiced, watery, barely enough to carve shapes into the fog, and everything they reveal seems worse than what they hide. In the narrow lanes, the shadows multiply. Footsteps echo, but you're never quite sure if they're yours. In certain districts, people vanish into doorways that don't look like doors and don't reappear. In others, entire groups gather around makeshift fires built in metal drums or old pianos missing their guts. The firewood is often furniture, or crates, or once a coffin. The sounds shift too. Less machinery, more muttering. A cough here, a scream there. A crash of bottles in the distance, followed by someone swearing they're fine. You learn not to look towards certain noises. Your curiosity is a risk. Around here, why is the kind of question that leads to bleeding. Let's talk about tenement life after sundown. Your room, already claustrophobic by daylight, now becomes oppressive. The walls seem to pull inward. The ceiling looms. And every breath you take feels shared, like someone else in the room has already breathed it before you. Candles flicker against walls streaked with damp. You've tried drying them with a coal fire, but all that did was cook the mildew and make it smell like sadness. There's a small window, but opening it invites in the air from the courtyard. A perfect cocktail of trash fires, spoiled meats, and the bathroom habits of your neighbours. You open it anyway, then shut it, then open it again. It's a ritual, a dance of futility. Like everything else. Your wash basin sits in the corner, its water stale and cloudy. You debate rinsing your face. You don't. You know what's in that water. You also know that your towel, hung near the fire to dry, has absorbed more smoke than a locomotive. In another room, someone is fighting. You hear the muffled shouts, the crack of wood, a child crying, then silence. Not a resolving silence, just a gap. A pause between eruptions. You stare at the ceiling and try to time your breathing with the distant clatter of a night train rolling through miles away, as if the rhythm might steady your pulse. Eventually, you lie down. Your bed sags like a broken promise. The stuffing inside smells faintly of mould and old hay and crackles when you move. You wrap yourself in blankets that retain the memory of every person who's used them before you, and try not to imagine their faces. Sleep doesn't come easily. The mattress itches. Your skin crawls. Your scalp prickles in that way that tells you something. Something has found its way into your hair again. You groan, scratch, turn over, and pretend it's nothing. It's never nothing. But exhaustion is stronger than revulsion, so eventually you drift. You dream of places you've never been, forests with clean air, rivers you could drink from, beds made with soft cotton, and somewhere in that dream, you're not coughing, you're not cold, you're not afraid to breathe too deeply, but morning always wins. It arrives not with sunlight, but with smoke and noise. A pot banging, a horse shouting, someone yelling about bread, someone else yelling about debt. The city wakes like a wounded animal, angry, stiff, and unwilling. You sit up, already sore, already dirty, already behind. Your water is colder than it was yesterday. The rags you use to scrub your face are stiff. Your shirt, worn 4 days now, smells like the street and feels like it was stitched from sandpaper. But it's clean enough. That's the goal. Not cleanliness, just less grime than yesterday. A kind of losing negotiation. And outside, the environment is waiting. The city isn't just where you live. It's what you wear. You carry it. In the crust beneath your nails. In the blackness that lines your collar. In the cough that never leaves. In the smoke that's found a permanent lease in the lining of your lungs. Even your posture changes over time. You stoop slightly, like chimneys, like the door frames you duck beneath, like the moral expectations of a society that judges you for your boots, but not the filth it piles in your path. Your shoulders curl inward, as though trying to protect your ribs from the cold. You squint, not from the sun, but from years of peering through fog and gaslight and your own disillusionment. You begin to measure time, not by clocks, but by stains. How long has that oil mark been on the kitchen floor? When did the mould over the window start forming that odd shape? Was it last year the plaster began to bubble like it was fermenting? And what about your lungs? They whistle now when you climb stairs. Not wheeze, whistle. Like wind to a cracked flute. Sometimes you laugh about it. Mostly you don't. You eat where you can. From carts, from stalls, from tins. Food tastes of smoke, of tin, of fatigue. When it doesn't, you assume something's wrong. You chew quickly like someone might take it from you. Then you wipe your mouth with your sleeve and hope it was the clean one. And even the things that were supposed to elevate you, schools, hospitals, churches, carry the same dust. The same stink of bodies pressed too close. At school, children faint from hunger. At the hospital, the beds stink of blood and bleach. At church, the incense can't quite cover the odour of the man in the pew beside you who hasn't bathed since Easter. And no one mentions it, because your prayers are meant to rise above the grime, not through it. The city's filth has a rhythm. If you learn it, you sync with it. Street sweepers clear the horse dung in the morning, and by mid-afternoon, it's back again. Washwomen hang clothes out to dry, and the soot paints them a new colour before the wind has stopped blowing. You polish your shoes only to have them swallowed whole by the puddle outside your front door. Maintenance is a performance. Cleanliness is an illusion. Hygiene is a whisper. And yet, you persist. You blow your nose, and it comes back black. You laugh, and it sounds like someone striking flint. You touch a railing, and it comes away sticky. You eat bread that crunches, not from crust, but from dust baked into the dough. You carry on, because this is your existence. Not by choice, but by repetition. You know which streets to avoid when it rains. You know which parts of the wall grow mould fastest. You know how long to hold your breath walking past the tanners. You know when the air turns from sharp to heavy, and you can feel the soot clinging to the back of your throat like a warning. You know. And yet you go out again. You take the same path. You smell the same smells. You breathe the same poison. You scratch the same itch. And somehow, beneath all of that, you still hold on to some deep, stupid hope. Hope that one day the fog will lift, that the river will run clean, that someone will invent a soap that doesn't burn, or a fire that doesn't choke you, or a cure for the cough that wakes you up before dawn. Until then, you carry your filth like everyone else. Not proudly, not shamefully, just inevitably. Because in the Victorian era, the environment isn't a backdrop, it's a second skin, and it never ever comes off. It begins before the sun, long before. You don't wake up, you emerge, like a worm dragged out of the earth by something heavier than instinct and colder than hope. The city hasn't stirred yet, but the fog already has. It presses against your window, seeping through cracks like it's owed something. The first sensation is stiffness, not the kind that goes away with a stretch, but the kind that feels permanent, like someone poured wax into your joints and let it harden overnight. You roll out of bed, slowly, because anything faster might rip something that's just barely holding together. Your knees creak. Your spine crackles. Your breath catches in your throat and tastes like old socks left too close to a fire. There is no snooze button, no gentle light alarm, no 5 more minutes. The factory bell rings from 5 blocks away, and it may as well be inside your skull. It doesn't ring melodically, it clanks like metal screaming at you. You know its exact rhythm. You know when it's one clang too late and your foreman will dock half your morning pay. You dress in the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before, and likely the week before that. The shirt is stiff from dried sweat. The collar has lost its shape. Your trousers sag in all the wrong places and bunch in the ones that make walking a test of loyalty. Your boots, if you have boots, are crusted with filth and softened by damp. The heel is worn unevenly, and it always tilts your gait slightly to the left. This is why your back aches. This is also why you never say anything. Saying something means nothing happens except you're now a complainer. If you're lucky enough to eat before work, it's not breakfast. It's caloric negotiation. Bread, mostly. Yesterday's if you're fortunate. The crust is tough enough to file teeth on. You dunk it in weak tea or beer, depending on what's left, just to soften it enough to chew. Maybe a sliver of cold bacon if someone died recently and the butcher had extras. If you're poor, which you are, it's more likely porridge. Not the creamy Pinterest kind. This porridge is grey, gluey, and mildly insulting. It tastes like disappointment, and you eat it fast to get it over with. If you work indoors, you walk to the mill or the factory. If you work outdoors, you walk to the yard, or the street, or the field. Either way you walk. You walk through alleys that smell like hot bread and wet rodents. You pass men in stiff coats, yelling at boys too small to be useful, but too poor to say no. You pass a woman huddled in a doorway, eyes half closed, knees drawn to her chest, humming something that sounds like a hymn, but might just be madness. You don't look too long. Looking makes it real. At the gates, there's already a line. Workers slouched forward like crows on a fence. No one talks. Talking wastes breath. You shuffle in when the doors open, and just like that, you disappear into the machine. Let's say you work in a textile mill. Congratulations. You'll be deaf by 30. The looms scream like banshees all day. It's a sound that doesn't fade when you go home. It follows you, ringing in your ears long after the machine's shut down. The air is filled with cotton dust, floating like tiny, poisonous snowflakes. You breathe it. You can't not. It settles in your lungs, coats your tongue, lines your teeth. You cough, and it comes out pale. Or maybe you work in a match factory. The phosphorus gets into everything. Your hands, your mouth, your hair. It bleaches your skin and rots your jaw if you're unlucky. They call it phossy jaw. The pain starts as a toothache. Then your gums swell. Then your face swells. Then you start smelling like something that's already been buried. Your co-workers move a little farther away, and the foreman reminds you that replacements are always cheaper than medicine. If you're a child, you might work under the looms, where the belts and gears spin fast enough to rip off fingers. You crawl in with a brush and pray the machines don't start while you're still inside. Sometimes they do. It's nobody's fault. Accidents happen. Be more careful next time, they say, even when there is no next time. If you're a woman, you may spend 10 hours sewing the same seam on the same garment over and over until your fingers cramp into claws. You'll be paid less than a man, even though you work harder. You'll be expected to stand straighter, speak less, and smile more. If you're pregnant, you hide it for as long as you can. If your water breaks mid-shift, someone will mop the floor and another woman will take your place before the rag dries. If you're a street worker, a labourer, a paver, a porter, your shift begins with a shovel and ends with a limp. You break rocks, you haul coal, you carry sacks heavier than your will to live. Your hands develop blisters inside blisters. Your back twists in ways that would make an osteopath weep. And when it rains, which is always, the mud sucks at your boots until you feel like the earth itself wants you to stay down. You do not clock out. You are dismissed. When the bell rings again, you file out with everyone else, blinking in the twilight like sleepwalkers waking up mid-step. Your face is grey, your lips are dry, your shoulders sag. Someone speaks to you, and you nod without hearing. You don't need to know what they said. You already agree. You carry your wages home in your pocket. Coins, mostly. Dirty, uneven, not nearly enough. You count them twice, not because you expect more to appear, but because you want to delay the moment you have to give them away. Rent, bread, coal, soap if you dare, and always, always something left unpaid. If your fingers aren't bleeding, your nails are black. If your stomach isn't growling, it's churning. If your feet aren't blistered, they're numb. Either way you limp. There's no weekend, no PTO. Sunday is technically a rest day, but it's also your only chance to wash anything, visit your mother, or bury a cousin. You're never free. You're just differently occupied. And still, somehow, the worst part isn't the work. It's the repetition. The knowledge that tomorrow will be exactly the same bell, same boots, same shirt, same ache, and it will not stop. Not for years. Not until you die. Or worse, until you retire. It's evening now. Your shift is over technically, but you wouldn't know it by your posture. Your spine has locked itself into a curve so permanent it might as well be carved. Your hands ache with a kind of precision pain. Knuckles stiff, wrists tight, fingers numb where they aren't bleeding. You used to notice the blisters. You don't anymore. They've become a kind of glove. The walk home is slower than the walk in. Not because the distance changed, but because your legs did. Every cobblestone you step over feels like a small betrayal. Your boots are soaked through from morning rain, and now they chafe at your heels with each step, like sandpaper dipped in vinegar. You drag one foot slightly behind the other, not because you're injured, but because your muscles just don't care anymore. The street is louder now, not happier, just more awake. Workers like you are pouring out of doorways and alleys, washing into the roads in thick, slouched waves. Everyone's shoulders are low. Everyone's eyes are half-lidded. It's like watching the city itself exhale, but not with relief, more like resignation. A breath held too long, finally escaping, only to be caught again in a few hours. You pass children selling flowers. Not because they want to, but because if they don't eat. Their hands are red with cold, their cheeks chapped, their voices too hoarse to sell anything. But they stand there anyway, petals drooping from buckets of brown water, trying to be part of something prettier than what the street allows. You don't stop. You don't have the coins. And even if you did, there's no vase waiting at home. Just a cracked mug that already smells like milk gone sideways. If you're a woman and you've made it through a factory shift, your work is only half done. You go home to more labour, cooking, cleaning, childcare, stitching buttons, mending socks, scraping candle wax off floorboards. The stove doesn't light itself. The firewood doesn't haul itself. The baby doesn't stop crying just because your eardrum already burst last week. If you complain, you're told it's your duty. If you cry, you're weak. If you collapse, you're lazy. So you carry on, dragging your fatigue behind you like a second skirt. If you're a man, maybe you go to the pub. Not because you enjoy it, but because it's the one place where sitting doesn't feel like failure. You order a beer, cheap, bitter, and watered down, and you sip it slowly. You talk to the same men you see every day. No one says anything new. No one expects them to. You talk about the weather, the foreman, the cough, the new lad who lost 2 fingers on the first day. And then you fall silent again, staring into the dregs of your drink like they might offer a prophecy. Sometimes there's a fight. Sometimes it doesn't even start with words. A shoulder bump, a spilled pint, a misunderstanding about someone's sister, then fists, then yelling, then someone on the floor with blood in their teeth and no memory of how it got there. No one calls the police. The barman shrugs and mops the floor with a rag that smells like decades of bad decisions. You head home if you're not already there. And home, as always, is not restful. It's not even private. If you rent a room, you share it. With siblings. With parents. With strangers you're not sure actually pay rent. The room smells like coal, socks, and someone's stomach problems. There's a basin in the corner with a crust of old soap and hair circling the drain like a warning. There's a chair that leans. A table with one leg shorter than the others. A cot that creaks even when no one is moving. You sit, but not for long. There's water to boil for tomorrow's tea. A shirt to scrub in cold water with a brush that no longer has bristles. Boots to scrape. A meal to prepare from ingredients that are more concept than nourishment. Boiled potatoes, maybe. Bread fried in lard. If you're feeling decadent, a bit of cheese. If you're not, you scrape the mould off the top and call it aged. You don't taste food anymore, not really. You taste texture, warmth, calories. Anything beyond that is luxury. Dinner is quiet. There's no music. No soft background hum of appliances. Just the sound of chewing, swallowing, and the occasional clearing of a throat that never feels fully clear. You don't talk about work. You don't have the words. It's not that no one's interested. It's that everyone already knows. They lived it. They're living it. They don't need to hear about the man whose sleeve got caught in the gears. They saw it. They don't want to hear about the child who fainted from hunger. It was their cousin. They don't ask how your back feels. They're afraid if you answer, they'll start crying and won't stop. The evening drags. Time stretches unnaturally. Every task takes just a little longer than it should. Your muscles resist. Your hands fumble. The candle burns low, casting everything in that orange glow that makes it feel like you're living in a jar of old jam. Eventually, you wash up, if you can call it that. A splash of water to the face. A wet cloth over your neck and armpits. Soap, if there's any left. You dry off with a towel that smells like everything you've ever tried to forget. Then you collapse into bed. Again. The mattress hasn't improved. If anything, it's grown a new lump. Your back finds it immediately. You close your eyes. But sleep doesn't come. Not yet. Because sleep is also labour. You lie awake and run through everything you didn't finish. The sock you didn't mend. The ladle you forgot to clean. The coal you didn't set aside. And beneath that, everything else. The job you hate. The rent you can't pay. The child who won't stop coughing. The dream you used to have about owning a shop or a horse, or just a pair of boots that fit. You try not to think about how many more days you'll live like this. You try not to think about how many people have died doing the same job you do. You try not to think about anything at all, because you have to wake up soon and do it all over again. The next day arrives before it's welcome. You don't rise, you surrender. To light, to cold, to duty. Your body moves like a tired machine, slow and hesitant, as though even your bones are sick of repeating this routine. You dress without thinking, muscle memory pulling sleeves over bruises, lacing worn boots with fingers that barely bend. Your mouth tastes like metal and musty cloth. You blink the sleep from your eyes, but the ache remains. It always does. There's no such thing as feeling rested. That concept belongs to novels and the very rich. For you, rest means the pain is quiet enough to ignore. Your back only screams when you turn wrong. Your knees only buckle on stairs. Your fingers only shake when it's cold. And it's always cold. You eat what's left, if anything. A crust of bread. A slice of turnip. A mug of tea so weak it's basically regret with steam. If the pantry is empty, you just leave. Hunger has a sound, but you've learned to mute it. You head to work. Again. The path hasn't changed. Neither have the people. You pass the same man spitting into the gutter. The same woman scrubbing steps with bare hands. The same child sitting on the stoop with that empty expression. The one you recognise in your own reflection. You arrive at the job. It doesn't matter what it is anymore. They all feel the same. The noise, the dust, the pressure. You clock in with your body, not a card. You give your hours in blood and muscle, and time you'll never get back. You give so much of yourself that you forget what you started with. Let's say today you're laying bricks. Your fingers are raw. The mortar is cold and gritty and seeps into every crack in your skin. You slap it between bricks until your hands ache. You lift, set, tap, again. Your rhythm is perfect. You could do this blind. You almost do. That's how people get hurt. Or maybe today you're in a printing shop. The ink stains your fingers. The rollers creak. The plates snap into place with a sound that makes your stomach twist. It smells like metal, sweat, and something chemical you can't name, but know isn't good for you. The press doesn't stop. Not for tired eyes, not for aching backs. You run it until your shoulder clicks every time you pull the handle. Or maybe you're scrubbing clothes, boiling water, heavy linens, red hands, wrung wrists. Your elbows scream. Your knuckles bleed. The steam fogs your lungs until you feel like you're drowning. You scrub out other people's filth, over and over, and then go home to your own. There are no safety rails, no gloves, no brakes unless someone loses a limb, and even then only a short one. You're always half a second away from something going wrong. Something slipping. A hand caught. A beam falling. A moment of distraction that changes your entire life. And not in the poetic way. Some workers chew tobacco to keep their mouths busy. Others whistle. You just breathe. In, out, repeat. Try not to think. Thinking hurts more than labour. The hours don't pass. They stretch. Time doesn't move forward, it coils. Every minute is a repetition of the last. Every hour feels stolen, not spent. You don't count down the time to quitting, you just endure. And when it ends, it doesn't feel like release. It feels like the pause between punishments. You go home. Again. Sometimes you stop on the way. At the market, at the pawn shop, at the chemist's. Not for luxury, for necessity. A bolt for the door. A candle stub. A tin of treacle if the child's cough sounds wetter than usual. You hand over coins you don't have. Promise to pay the rest next week. You won't. They know. but they take it anyway. If you're one of the lucky ones, maybe you do piecework at home after your day job. Buttonholes, lace trim, matchboxes. You work by lamplight, hunched over a table that wobbles. You poke yourself with needles. You squint until your eyes blur. You do this because the factory wage isn't enough, and the baby needs milk, and the rent is due, and the landlady already knocked once this week, and next time she won't. And then you rest. But not really, because now comes the next kind of work. Emotional work. Holding in tears because the kids are watching. Pretending not to be afraid because your partner already is. Trying to stretch 2 shillings into 6 meals and convincing yourself the bread isn't mouldy. It's just spotted. Lying awake wondering if you could run. Not far. Just somewhere. Then remembering you can't. No money. No train fare. No choices. So you stay. You stay in this job. This house. This body. You stay because there's nowhere else. You stay because everyone else does. You stay because hope has been replaced with habit. And somewhere in the back of your mind you wonder, is this it? This rhythm, this ache, this life? You've seen older men who worked longer. Their fingers curled permanently, their eyes clouded, their mouths half open like they forgot how to close them. They don't speak much. They sit by the fire and look past it. You know that look. It's the look of someone who's spent everything and got nothing back. You know that's your future, if you're lucky. Because for most people, the work doesn't stop. It's not a path. It's a loop. You're born into it. You die in it. And somewhere in between, you pass the baton to the next one in line. A child. Your child. Maybe they'll have it better. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll grow up strong and clever and find a way out. Or maybe they'll just grow up fast and bitter and learn how to scrape boots on the curb and hold their breath when the factory doors open. Just like you did. Just like you still do. Because here, in the Victorian world, labour isn't just what you do. It's who you are. It's how you measure your worth. It's the only thing standing between you and hunger. And it is never, ever enough. Let's begin with a simple fact. You are not important. Not in the eyes of the state. Not in the eyes of your employer. Not even, on occasion, in the eyes of your local clergyman. You are replaceable. You are interchangeable. If you were to collapse in the street right now, someone would drag you to the side, not out of kindness, but to stop you from disrupting foot traffic. Your name would vanish, your debts would not, and your family would be told to vacate the room by the end of the week. There would be no scandal, no mourning, just the faint smell of old boots and bureaucracy. Because in Victorian England, your place in the social order is not something you climb. It is something you are born into and then reminded of constantly. It's written in the way people speak to you, the way they look at you, the way they choose not to look at you. You can scrub until your skin blisters, iron your collar flat as a bishop's sermon, and practice elocution until your vowels are rounder than a boiled potato. But none of it matters. People still know. They know by your boots, your fingernails, the number of calluses on your hands, the shade of your shirt, and how many times it's been mended. You can't hide your class any more than you can hide the soot embedded into your pores. The upper classes walk differently. They move like gravity doesn't apply to them. Their shoes never touch puddles. Their cuffs remain crisp. They have that glassy-eyed calm of people who've never had to run after a cart or negotiate a second-hand candle. They are polished, perfumed, and practically allergic to struggle. Their faces don't wrinkle from stress. They wrinkle from squash courts and expensive boredom. You've seen them in the parks, in the carriages, in the shops where you're not welcome but occasionally sneak into just to smell the soap. They speak in long vowels and short sentences. They ask for things without saying please, and they always get them. When they laugh, it sounds like applause. When they frown, someone gets fired. You're not one of them. You work behind them, beneath them, around them, and your humiliation is expected. It begins at the shops. The butcher sneers when you ask for meat not gone entirely grey. The grocer weighs your potatoes twice, just to make sure you're not accidentally getting more than your shilling's worth. The dressmaker won't let you touch the good fabric. Just for looking, she says, even though your hands are clean. Cleaner probably than hers. If you're a woman, the indignity doubles. You're judged by your hemline, your laces, your accent. You're either too dowdy or too proud. If you wear perfume, it's a scandal. If you don't, you're disgusting. If you speak up, you're mouthy. If you stay quiet, you're invisible. There is no winning. There is only enduring. Now imagine you're a servant, a maid, a housekeeper, a scullery girl, a boot boy. You live in someone else's house. You sleep in a room that isn't yours. You wear clothes they gave you, wash with water they allow you, eat food they didn't finish. You rise before them, scrub their floors, shine their silver, and vanish before they come downstairs so they can pretend the clean just appeared like magic. You know everything about them, their secrets, their stains, their strange habits. You see them at their worst, and yet you're expected to call them sir, or ma'am, or mistress. And if you speak out of turn, or drop a plate, or forget to bow low enough, you can be dismissed on the spot. No reference, no pay, no second chances. And if you're dismissed without reference, no one else will hire you. You're blacklisted, silently, forever. Even your humiliation has its own hierarchy. You can be a low servant in a grand house, looked down upon by the footmen in powdered wigs. You can be a respected cook in a lesser home, envied by chambermaids who wish they had your keys. The layers of status are endless, microscopic. It's a pyramid scheme of power, and no one escapes the structure. They just try to fall a little slower. Let's talk about how the law sees you. It doesn't. The police don't protect you. They monitor you. You walk down the wrong street at the wrong hour, and you're pulled aside, questioned, and inspected like a loose cartwheel. If you run, you're guilty. If you freeze, you're suspicious. If you open your mouth, you'd better speak like someone who knows their place. Justice is a thing that happens to other people. Prison is always closer than freedom. There are separate entrances to buildings, separate rules in shops, separate carriages on the train for the classes that matter. You ride third class, if you can afford a ticket at all. You stand in the rain while they step through a marble foyer. You're not just poor, you are structurally, perpetually, deliberately beneath. And if you think dignity is a shield, think again. Let's say you save up. You buy a new coat. You comb your hair. You walk into a fine restaurant. They see you. Instantly. Not your new coat, but your posture. Not your shoes, but how you hesitate at the threshold. The waiter ignores you. The patrons glance sideways. The man at the door clears his throat. "Can I help you?" he asks, like the answer had better be yes. "I'm leaving." And you do. Not because you want to, but because you've been trained. That's what the system does best. It doesn't just restrict your access, it restricts your imagination. Eventually, you stop dreaming about more. You start dreaming about slightly less worse. A smaller blister, a quieter boss, a longer lunch. Even charity has strings. If you beg for food at a parish hall, you eat with your head down and your hat off. If you sleep at a workhouse, you leave your pride at the door. If you ask for help, you are branded ungrateful, unclean, unworthy. And if you don't ask, you suffer quietly, which is what they prefer. The humiliation is so constant, so ambient, so normal, that it stops feeling like humiliation at all. It just becomes air. You breathe it in. You exhale apology. You tuck your chin. You thank the man who gives you less than you deserve because he could have given nothing. And that's how it works. 1,000,000 small humiliations. Stacked, layered, pressed into you until you carry them without noticing the weight. Because that's the cost of being at the bottom. Not just hard work, not just poverty, but the daily, hourly, minute-by-minute reminder that you are less. You begin to realise that even your posture is political. If you stand too straight, someone will accuse you of arrogance. If you hunch too far, they'll say you've already given up. So you learn a stance. Shoulders down, but not too low. Head forward, but eyes slightly lowered. Hands visible but still. You carry yourself like a servant entering a parlour, meek but useful, present but unobtrusive. Your body becomes a negotiation, an apology in motion. Children learn this early. Before they know their letters, they know their rank. They know to step aside for men in frock coats. They know to say sir to boys not much older than them, simply because those boys wear cleaner hats. You see it on the streets. 5-year-olds bowing their heads for bankers. Little girls curtsying to women whose dogs wear better shoes than they do. Respect isn't earned. It's inherited. Bought. Displayed in fabric and diction and posture. Even your voice betrays you. The wrong accent is a dead giveaway. That short vowel, that clipped consonant, that hard-edged H that escapes without warning. They notice. They always notice. You could memorise every line of Shakespeare and still be dismissed for saying art instead of out. You could read the Bible cover to cover and still be denied entrance to a gentleman's club because your God doesn't rhyme with theirs. So you practice, quietly, alone. You repeat phrases you heard the shop girl use. You try to soften your vowels, add an extra syllable when none exists, but it never sticks. The moment you're nervous, the mask cracks. Your real voice slips out like a secret you weren't supposed to tell. You see it in their eyes, the tightening, the subtle recoil. They know. You've outed yourself. Again. Even the jobs carry their own caste system. There are respectable trades, bakers, butchers, cobblers, blacksmiths. They're still poor, but poor with purpose. Then there are the lower jobs, street sweepers, night soil men, rat catchers, match sellers. They don't just exist in poverty, they embody it. They are seen as walking proof that you can fall even further. And then there are jobs that are invisible. Washerwomen, chimney boys, dock loaders. Their work makes the world run. Their absence would be a crisis. But no one sees them unless something goes wrong. The chimney gets blocked, the laundry comes back late, the cargo is damaged, and then, suddenly, they exist, just long enough to be scolded. At the top of the pyramid sit those who do nothing. Landowners, aristocrats, men who are born with titles and who will die with them, regardless of what they do in between. They host dinners, they inspect horses, They make decisions that shape lives they will never meet. Their money makes more money, even while they sleep. And you serve them, directly or indirectly. Your labour props up their leisure. Your misery props up their comfort. And yet, they are adored. You see it every day. The crowds lining the streets for a glimpse of someone whose only accomplishment is being born on the right rug. The headlines that praised Lord so-and-so for his fine waistcoat. The gossip about Lady this and that summer wardrobe. People cheer them, envy them, aspire to them. You don't. Not because you're above it, but because you know you will never be one of them. The closest you get to the upper class is when you clean their chamber pots, or walk past their portraits in a gallery and notice that even in oil paint they look smug. Let's talk about clothing. You wear what you can afford, and what you can afford is dictated by utility. Fabric that doesn't tear, shoes that last one winter, if not two. A coat that's been patched so many times it's more stitching than wool. You wash what you can, but soap is dear and water takes time. So you hang clothes by the fire and hope the smoke disguises the rest. Then you walk down the street and pass someone whose coat was made in Paris. Silk lining, velvet collar, not a patch in sight, and you realise that to some people, clothes aren't just protection, they're armour. They deflect suspicion. They command doors to open. They hush crowds. Your clothes? Your clothes explain everything before you say a word. You are poor. You're tired. You're trying, but failing to hide it. Shoes are the worst. Yours are cracked, flapping at the heel. You stuff them with paper to keep the rain out, though the paper always soaks through. You walk carefully, not to avoid slipping, but because the sole is worn to a whisper, and you've stepped on too many sharp stones to take risks. The rich wear boots you could eat off. Shine so bright you can see your whole failure reflected back in them. Their steps are crisp, confident. Their shoelaces cost more than your entire week's wage. And if you scuff them by accident, there's a look they give you. A glance so sharp, it might as well be a slap. You mumble an apology, even when it's not your fault. Because apologies are your currency. You spend them constantly. When you ask for time off. When you ask for payment you're owed. When you ask a policeman for help, and he answers with a shrug. You say sorry when someone bumps into you, because you've been taught that your existence is an inconvenience. The church tries to help. Sometimes it tells you that humility is a virtue, that suffering is holy, that the last shall be first, eventually, after death, maybe. Until then, keep quiet, keep working, keep your head down. They say charity is a gift, but it always comes wrapped in judgment. Food is handed out with a lecture, clothes with a reminder that you're fortunate to receive them. You accept both, because what's the alternative? Starving with dignity? There are lectures for the men too, delivered in town halls, at corners, by newspaper editorials. They say you drink too much, that you're idle, that you breed recklessly, that you don't want to improve your station, that you have everything you need to succeed. You're just too lazy to do it. You read those words with hands that bled yesterday. You listen to those sermons with lungs full of factory air. You walk past those posters with shoes falling apart, and you wonder what exactly you're supposed to do differently. But you never say it aloud, because saying it makes you angry. And anger is dangerous. You've seen what happens when the poor get angry. They get arrested, they get broken, they get blamed. So you smile when you're supposed to. You bow when you're expected to. You keep your voice low and your hat off and your knees folded neatly in your coat pocket, like there's something embarrassing. You've learned how to disappear in plain sight, because that's the only way you survive. You become small, soft-spoken, useful, forgettable. And if you're lucky, they'll ignore you. If you're unlucky, they'll notice. And nothing good comes of being noticed. Not when you have nothing to offer but your labour. Not when your last name opens no doors. Not when your cleanest shirt still smells like coal. And so you carry on. Bent, quiet. A participant in a system that does not care whether you rise or fall, so long as you don't make noise on the way down. You start to realise that the humiliation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the smallest things. The way you're handed a coin with 2 fingers, like you're contagious. The way someone steps slightly to the side to avoid touching your sleeve on the tram. The way you hand back change and they wipe their hand afterward, casually, like they're dusting off crumbs. Only it's you they're dusting. It happens so often, you stop noticing. Then, one day, you watch someone else be treated that way. A boy at the bakery. A woman in the post office. You see them flinch when the shopkeeper's tone sharpens. You see their eyes dart to the floor. You see their hands twitch with the need to not cause trouble. And in that moment, you understand something awful. That's how you look too. The humiliation is baked into every transaction, not just in how you're treated, but in what you're allowed to expect. There are entire sections of the city you're technically allowed to enter, but shouldn't. Tea shops with doormen who look you up and down like you've tracked in something unseemly. Bookstores where the clerk keeps a sharp eye on your pockets. Train compartments where you're asked, politely of course, if perhaps you meant to be somewhere else. You learn to know your place. You learn it so well that eventually you start teaching it to others without realizing it. You scold your child for speaking too freely in public. You whisper reminders to your wife to lower her eyes when the landlady passes. You tell the boy next door not to loiter near the gentleman's gate. Not because you're cruel, because you've been trained. And because you think, in some distant, dented part of your mind, that if you all behave correctly, maybe things will go easier. They don't. At best, you become invisible. At worst, you become entertaining. That's the new trend, you see. The rich want to experience the poor. They visit workhouses on tours. They write articles about your living conditions. They paint pictures of coal miners with soot-streaked cheeks, their sadness rendered poetic. They speak with gentle awe about your resilience, as if poverty were a talent and starvation a quirk of character. They'll give you a penny, then write a pamphlet about it. They'll compliment your honest labour, then fire you when you limp. They say you're noble in suffering, which is convenient, because suffering is the only thing you're allowed to do. The cruelest thing? They expect you to be grateful, not for kindness, but for the order of it all, for the fact that you know your place, that you don't revolt, that you don't strike, that you fold your hands and ask for crumbs with a smile and say, "God bless you," to the man who just docked your pay because your boots were muddy. And you are grateful, in a way, because you've seen what happens to the ones who don't behave, the ones who speak too loud, who organise, who write angry letters, who refuse to bow. They vanish, quietly, sometimes with chains, sometimes with bruises, sometimes just with silence. No one asks, no one answers. You're told they were trouble, and you understand. Trouble is contagious, so you go home, you wash your hands, trying to scrub off the invisible dirt of judgment. You speak softly, you behave well, and still there are reminders. Your children are denied spots at schools because of your name. You apply for a clerk job and are told not your sort. You fall ill and the doctor asks, first, if you're paid up, and second, if you're sure you're not malingering. You're never trusted. Not fully. Not by the law. Not by institutions. Not even by other poor people sometimes, who are desperate to prove they are not that kind of poor. You see it everywhere. People punching downward, sideways, anywhere but up. You see the boy who steals bread get chased, while the merchant who waters his milk gets applauded for thrift. You see the landlord raise rent and call it progress, while the tenant who can't pay is called a leech. You see the girl who works 18 hours a day blamed for her torn dress, while the man who leers at her in the stairwell gets invited to dinner. And all of it is allowed, because hierarchy needs humiliation to function. It needs you to feel ashamed, not just of your poverty, but of your effort, of your need, of your noise, of your hope, because hope is dangerous. Hope suggests you believe you might deserve more, that you might someday rise above your station. And if there's one thing the system can't tolerate, it's a poor man who believes he shouldn't be poor. So it crushes hope, in little ways. It tells you that the rich are rich because they are better, smarter, finer, more refined, that their skin is cleaner because their souls are cleaner, that your pain is your fault, that your struggle is ugly, that you are the reason things are hard. And after a while, you believe it, because you're too tired not to, because it's easier to blame yourself than to scream at a wall that doesn't answer, because no one listens to screams from down here. They only listen to results. And your result is this: you are poor, you are beneath, you are quiet, you are good. That's what they want in the end. A poor person who suffers well, who suffers gracefully, who dies without making a mess, who leaves a room without taking up space, who says thank you when handed nothing. And you try so hard to be that kind of poor, but some nights, when the fire goes out and the last candle flickers, and the street outside is quiet enough that you can hear your own breath, something in you shifts, just a little. A sliver of sharp, a corner of rage, a flash of the knowledge that the system is not holy, that this suffering is not noble, that the ladder is pulled up, not broken. And you think, just for a moment, what would happen if you stopped apologizing? If you stopped bowing? If you let your voice rise just once? And then you roll over. You pull the blanket tighter. You listen to the wind, because tomorrow is another work day, and the rent is due, and the children need breakfast, and rebellion doesn't boil water. So you fold the rage, you tuck it away, and you get some rest. Because being poor is exhausting, but being humiliated, that's a full-time job. It starts with what you're taught to believe, not what you know, not what you see, but what you're told over and over until it becomes part of your breath. You're told that hard work is holy. You're told that suffering builds character. You're told that obedience is the highest form of virtue. These aren't just ideas, these are instructions, cultural blueprints, a scaffolding of values built not to elevate you, but to hold you still, to convince you that your hardship is moral, that the pain has meaning, that poverty isn't a crisis, it's a path to grace. From the pulpit, the preacher tells you that the meek shall inherit the earth. He says it with conviction, with certainty, with shoes that cost more than your entire wardrobe. He speaks of humility while his voice echoes to a church built with offerings from the hungry. He tells you that your reward will come in heaven, which is convenient, because he can't be held accountable for delays. You're taught to kneel, to confess, to repent, but never to question. The system, the suffering, the hierarchy, these are God's will, you're told. Doubting them is sin. Wanting more is vanity. Speaking out is rebellion, not against man, but against the divine. And so the sermons teach you to swallow your anger, to wash your shame in holy water, to call your fatigue faith. You learn to carry guilt for things that were never your fault. Your hunger, your joblessness, your child's death from cholera. You wonder if you prayed enough, if you were patient enough, if maybe this is punishment for some secret flaw you can't name. Because in the Victorian era, belief isn't a comfort. It's a control mechanism, wrapped in scripture, draped in incense, spoken in Latin you can't understand, but pretend to respect. But religion isn't the only source of doctrine. There are rules in your books too, if you can read them. The penny paper tells you who matters, not you, not your neighbours. It tells you of lords and ladies, of royal births and horse races and scandals at opera balls. You read about things you'll never see, by people you'll never meet, who live lives you could never afford to imagine. But you read them anyway, because for a few minutes it's an escape, or worse, a mirror. You start to believe their problems are yours, that the Duchess's heartbreak over a mismatched engagement is as tragic as your cousin losing a leg in the foundry, that the shortage of imported wine is a crisis, that lace imports matter, that society is fragile and you must not upset it. The paper tells you what to want: a cleaner coat, a quieter wife, a straighter spine, a child who says please and thank you, even when there's nothing to ask for. And most of all, respectability, that glittering lie, that promise that if you behave, if you save, if you polish your boots and your morals, you might one day be almost acceptable. Respectability is a costume, and the poor are expected to rent it, even if it bankrupts them. The wealthy use it like a mask, a shield, a tool. They attend the theatre in silk gloves, then spend the night in brothels and emerge untarnished. You miss one Sunday service, and you're whispered about for weeks. They are allowed vices. You're expected to perform virtue. Even your grief must be tidy. You're told how to mourn, how to dress in black, how long to keep the drapes drawn, how to speak of the dead in hushed, poetic tones, never mentioning the lice, the fever, the coughing fits that ended in blood, never speaking of the doctor who arrived too late, or the undertaker who charged double, or the landlord who offered sympathy, then raised the rent. Culture tells you to be graceful in your loss, not loud, not angry, not broken, and certainly not inconvenient. If you're a woman, the rules multiply. You are taught that silence is strength, that modesty is beauty, that obedience is love. You're praised for endurance, never resistance. You're expected to be clean, moral, cheerful, and never visibly tired, even when you are doing the labour of 5 men and being paid less than half of one. You wear corsets that bruise your ribs. You wear dresses that weigh more than your children. You smile when spoken to, even if the words are cruel. You laugh at jokes that cut you. You thank the man who lets you stand in his shadow. And you're told this is elegance, this is femininity, this is your place. And you know what happens to women who step out of place: the fallen woman, the mad woman, the difficult wife, the spinster, the witch. Culture has a name for every woman who refuses to be convenient, and a punishment too. Even medicine is a kind of belief system, and it does not believe in you. Doctors speak of female hysteria like it's a diagnosis, not a catch-all for every emotion you're not supposed to have. They bleed you when you're sick. They sedate you when you're sad. They warn that reading novels will stir your womb, and that fresh air is a risk if you're feeling too clever. Men, too, are told what to be. Strong, stoic, industrious, silent. You're taught to bottle grief and drown fear, to push through injury, to keep working with broken fingers and pretend it's noble, to die early and be remembered as dependable. The culture does not ask if you are happy. It asks only if you are useful. And if you're not, it finds a name for you too. Layabout, lunatic, drunk, vagrant, deviant, scum. Sometimes all at once. Education, if you get it, is less about learning and more about conforming. You memorise dates, recite kings, practice penmanship. You are not taught to question. You are taught to obey, to spell God with a capital G and you with a lowercase y. And if you ask why, you're told that some questions are above your station. The museum won't let you in. The library closes early. The university is not for you. Knowledge is not a right, it's a currency, and the poor cannot afford it. Even art is against you. The paintings in the galleries do not look like your family. The statues do not show bodies like yours. The poetry does not speak your pain. It wraps it in ribbons and hands it back to you as metaphor. Beauty is defined by distance from your reality. So you stop looking. Or worse, you start pretending you're not seeing it clearly. You teach your child to recite poems they don't understand, because maybe someone will think they're clever. You save for a piano you can't play, because maybe someone will think you're refined. You iron your only shirt until it shines, because maybe someone will think you belong. Belonging, that's the cruelest belief of all. The idea that if you just try hard enough, if you just follow all the rules, if you just believe correctly, you will finally be seen, and maybe loved, and maybe safe. But the truth is, you are never safe. Not from the system, not from the expectations, not even from yourself. Because after a while, you start to believe it, that this is what life is, that you deserve the cold, that you are lucky to work until your spine bends, that your daughter's silence is virtue, that your son's anger is sin, that the hunger is natural, that the sorrow is blessed, and that the men in silk gloves were right all along. Because that's what belief does. It burrows, it binds, it blinds, until you can't tell the difference between suffering and salvation. And even if you could, you wouldn't say it out loud, because culture doesn't need you to agree. It only needs you to comply. You start to notice that even silence has a script. There are things you don't talk about. Not because you don't think them, but because you've learned they don't belong in polite conversation. Pain, for example, hunger, fear. You speak of them only in vague metaphors, in lowered voices, in back corners of shared rooms. If you're a man, you're told to swallow it. If you're a woman, to decorate it. If you're a child, to ignore it. Language is policed by respectability. You're taught which words are crude, which tones are vulgar, which phrases will get you labelled, stared at, cast out. It's not enough to speak. You must speak correctly. And correctly always sounds like someone wealthier than you. So you listen to how the upper class talks, their casual inflection, their slow vowels, the way their sentences rise and fall like carriages passing over smooth cobblestones. You mimic them in front of a mirror, in the dark, just to see if it's possible. It isn't. Because imitation doesn't erase where you come from. It only makes the distance more obvious. You start to hear the lies tucked neatly into every lesson. They say the poor are dirty, but they charge too much for soap. They say the poor are immoral, but rent out tenements with shared beds and no locks. They say the poor are uneducated, then close the schoolhouse and raise the book tax. They say you choose this, that poverty is personal failure, that if you were clever, you would escape. But you know the truth. Cleverness doesn't clean the water. It doesn't make the job safer. It doesn't lower the rent or fix the roof or keep your child from coughing herself to sleep. What they call culture is just a game of survival dressed in lace. Everything in Victorian society is curated. Manners, music, morality. It's all choreography, and you're expected to learn the steps without being taught the dance. There are rules for eating. Don't slurp. Don't chew too loudly. Don't eat with your elbows on the table. Don't take more than your share. But don't appear too hungry either. Don't speak while eating. Don't exist too vividly while eating. And yet, in your house, food is a ceremony of necessity. You eat fast because the baby is crying, because the shift starts soon, because there's not enough for seconds. You eat with your hands when the spoon's gone missing. You lick the bowl when no one's looking. You ration the bread so precisely it feels like slicing through time. And you do it quietly, because no one wants to hear the sound of survival, especially not the people with linen napkins. Entertainment is supposed to be a release, a balm, but even there, the division is loud. The opera is not for you. The symphony is not for you. The theatre, maybe, if you can afford the gallery seats, up in the rafters where the sound is swallowed by beams and the view is of wigs and chandeliers, not actors. You go because it's the only place where dreaming is allowed. But even the stories are slanted. The villains are poor. The heroes are noble. By blood, not by action. The endings are happy if you marry up. You leave the theatre not uplifted, but reminded. Reminded of where you stand, and where you must stay. Because culture isn't just art, it's boundary. A velvet rope wrapped in music. A wall painted with pretty pictures. And you are always on the wrong side of the frame. You try to belong by participating. You read the right stories. Sing the right hymns. Wear your Sunday best until the seams give out. You smile when appropriate. Laugh when permitted. You master the illusion of belonging. But you never forget that it is an illusion. Even holidays are filtered through expectation. Christmas is not just a celebration, it's a test. Did you decorate? Did you donate? Did you host? Did you behave? You are told that joy is available to all, but only if it's clean, polished, contained. No loudness, no drunkenness, no rough edges. Only lace and pudding and carols sung in key. You watch your neighbour spend her last pennies on goose fat and ribbons, just to avoid the shame of a bare table. You see a man arrested for stealing a toy his child asked Santa for. You learn that celebration, like everything else, has a price. And when you can't afford it, you fake it, or hide, or apologise. Morality itself is performative. It's not about what you do, but how others see you doing it. Did you go to church? Did you close your shop on Sundays? Did you scold your daughter when her dress rode up past her boots? Did you say God willing when you mentioned your work? Did you speak harshly of drunks and loudly of temperance? Did you look like someone good? Because looking good is more important than being good. Your neighbour beats his wife, but he says grace before dinner. The The factory owner employs children, but he donates to the cathedral roof. The widow 2 doors down is shunned for living alone, as if loneliness were a crime. It is not what you are, it is what you're seen to be. And there is always someone watching. The landlord, the foreman, the priest, the neighbour at her window. Eyes everywhere. Culture makes a panopticon out of poverty. You monitor yourself even when no one is around. You correct your children before they speak. You lower your voice at night, even though the walls are thin and no one's listening. You clean twice as hard before inspections, of which there are many, informal and otherwise. Even your home is judged. The lace on the window, the ash in the fireplace, the smell of onions or damp or something worse. There is no space that belongs solely to you, no moment unshaped by expectation. You find yourself rehearsing silence before you even speak, and when you do speak, it's always with a hedge. I'm sorry to ask. Forgive me, but I know it's not my place. You apologise for needing anything, for wanting anything, for being seen. And they call this grace. They say you are well behaved. They praise you for knowing your station, and you nod, and you thank them. Because that's what belief does. It teaches you to thank the hand that holds you down, just for not letting go. Eventually, you stop needing to be told. The rules live in you now. Not carved, not burned, but woven into your instincts, your reflexes, your very breath. You walk a little slower past the bank. You remove your cap before someone asks. You smile when you don't feel like smiling. You thank people who've given you nothing but permission to keep breathing. You feel it when you wake, before your feet hit the floor. A tightness in the chest. Not pain, not fear, just pressure. Like you're being pressed into shape. That shape is called respectable, and it's killing you softly. Your internal monologue is no longer yours. It speaks in the voice of your boss, your landlord, your clergyman, your mother tired of telling you not to attract attention. You try to think something bold, something selfish, and immediately you flinch, as if someone heard, as if the walls themselves might report you. There is no privacy, not really. Not in a room you share with 5 others. Not in a neighbourhood where everyone knows how much coal you buy. Not in a world where deviation is a kind of profanity. Even your dreams are small now. You used to dream of escaping, owning something, travelling, of being known perhaps for something more than your silence. But now you dream of not being called out, of making it through Sunday dinner without a reprimand, of your child getting through the school term without being marked unruly for asking too many questions. You dream of being unremarkable, of fitting just right. That's what belief has done to you. Not just religious belief, not just cultural belief, but the belief in their story. The one where you are meant to suffer, where your role is to endure, to support, to wait, to serve, to be proud of what little you have, and ashamed of wanting more. This belief is in your posture now, in the way you lower your eyes on the street, in the way you laugh too quickly at a joke from someone above you, in the way you say thank you when someone does not spit in your direction. You have learned to read the weather of power, who you may speak to, how close you may stand, when to offer a chair, when to disappear entirely. You call it manners, but it's not. It's a submission, with a smile. Even illness comes with etiquette. You can't cough too loud. You can't groan. You can't make others uncomfortable with your pain, or they might think you're exaggerating. So you whisper your suffering. You underplay it. You say it's just a touch of something, even when you've been bleeding for 3 days. Even dying must be done politely. You keep the windows shut. You warn the neighbours not to worry if they hear crying. You fold your body like a note you're trying to pass without being caught. And when the end comes, you hope, just hope, that your final expression is serene enough not to offend. There are stories told to keep you quiet, cautionary tales of people who tried to rise and were punished, of women who spoke out and were institutionalized, of men who organized and vanished. They are told with a shiver, with a shake of the head. Pity about him. She was so clever once. Could have had a decent life if he'd just stayed in his lane. No one says the system was wrong. They say the person was too much, too proud, too fast, too loud. And you take the lesson. You slow your gait, you still your tongue. You iron your silence and wear it like it's Sunday best. Culture, you realise, is not what surrounds you. It's what limits you. It's what keeps you from raising your voice, even when your throat is full of splinters. It's what makes you scold your son for crying instead of asking why he hurts. It's what makes you stay in a room that's burning because leaving would seem impolite. And it's everywhere. In the music that never mentions your kind. In the books that turn your struggle into villainy. In the portraits of people who never lifted a finger, but who are somehow worth remembering. In the holidays that demand you spend what you don't have to celebrate values you were never allowed to practice. In the sermons that tell you how to be good, but never how to be whole, so you perform. Every day, you rehearse your life, you memorize your lines, you adjust your volume and your angle and your gait and your hunger and your hope until they are all small enough to fit inside a frame that someone else built. And the most frightening part? It works. People stop scolding. You're called respectable. You are seen, briefly, as someone who has learned their place. And so you carry on. A perfect silhouette of obedience. A whisper shaped like a man. A shadow wearing a bonnet. And you wonder not if there is more to life. You know there is. You see it across the street. In the windows with lace. In the books you're not supposed to read. In the silence the rich get to enjoy without consequence. You wonder instead if you would even recognise yourself without the weight. Without the need to be good. Without the belief that made this cage feel like a chapel. And that perhaps is the final cruelty of Victorian culture. Not that it breaks you, but that it teaches you to love the shape of the cracks. Victorian hygiene wasn't a routine, it was a gamble. A desperate, improvised negotiation with dirt, disease, superstition, and the occasional dead rat, usually in your drinking water. Let's start with the basics. You want to wash. Good instincts. But where? There is no bathroom, not in the way you understand it, no taps, no porcelain sink, no fluffy towels with embroidered initials. You don't walk into a room and expect cleanliness to be summoned by plumbing. You walk into a corner of the kitchen where a cracked basin waits beside a pitcher of water that's probably been used 3 times today already. It's cold. It always is. You splash it on your face. It smells faintly of iron and something else. Something you've stopped questioning. You scrub behind your ears with a rag that was once white, but is now a sort of morally ambiguous beige. You pat yourself dry with yesterday's apron. You are, technically, clean. You step outside. Within moments, the soot sticks to your damp face like you've been lightly breaded. Horse dung perfumes the air. Someone coughs nearby. A deep, wet cough. The kind you hear more often than birdsong. A passing man empties his pipe spit into the gutter, where it joins a cocktail of runoff, urine, ash, and industrial waste. And that's just the morning. Let's say, wild idea, you want to bathe. Well, that's an ordeal. First, you need a tub. Not a built-in one, those belong to novels and titled people, but a tin basin the size of a laundry bin. Then you need water, several bucketfuls, carried from the pump down the road, or up from the courtyard well, depending on whether you want cholera or dysentery today. Then you need to heat it on the stove, slowly, carefully, because you have one pot and it's already half full of the evening soup. Then you fill the tub. Then you get in. Then someone else knocks and asks if they can use the water after you're done, and you say yes, because that's how it works. Bathwater is a communal resource, like gossip or shame. Children bathe first, then adults, then the oldest or the drunkest, depending on who gets there in time. By the end, the water has gone from clear to ambiguous. It's still warm, but comfort is not the point. You emerge cleanish, slightly boiled, definitely pruned. And then it's another 3 to 4 weeks before you attempt this again, unless you're rich. In which case, you bathe more frequently, but with supervision. The upper class does not bathe alone. That would be unseemly. A maid draws the bath. Another lays out clothes. A third may even scrub your back gently, with a sponge imported from somewhere your servants can't pronounce. You smell of lavender and conquest. Meanwhile, back in the tenement, your neighbour has just thrown last night's slop out the window. It lands near a child's shoes. No one reacts. That's just life. You want to brush your teeth. Admirable. But toothbrushes are not standard issue. Not for people like you. If you own one, it's likely made from bone and boar bristle. Soothing, if you're into dental masochism. Toothpaste is imaginative. Chalk, soap, crushed brick, salt, charcoal, pick your flavour. You could also just rinse your mouth with urine. No, really, it's considered antiseptic. Considered is doing a lot of work in that sentence. You brush, you gag, you spit into a chamber pot, you feel vaguely worse than when you started. Congratulations. Your breath now smells like regret and mint. But your teeth? Your teeth are on their own. There are no dentists. There are men with pliers. And they are eager. You have a toothache? Out it comes. No numbing, no discussion. If you're very lucky, they'll give you a shot of gin first. If you're unlucky, they'll miss the tooth and try again. And again, until something cracks. Could be the tooth, could be your sanity. You bleed into a cloth and go to work. Later, at dinner, your gum weeps into your stew. There are smells. You get used to them, mostly. The river smells like sadness. The streets smell like meat, sweat, smoke, and time. Your clothes smell like everything you've ever walked past. Your home smells like feet and soap and mildew and boil things. You go nose blind eventually, but outsiders notice. Visitors wrinkle their noses. Doctors make notes. And newspapers write about the great stench, as if it's a one-time event, not your hourly reality. You try to clean. You sweep. You scrub. You boil things. But dust returns. Mould multiplies. Rats do not respond to stern language. You hang lavender near the bed. You light tallow candles. You sprinkle vinegar on the floorboards. You tell yourself it helps, because believing that is easier than moving. Let's not forget the toilets. Because how could we? They're not inside. That's for the rich, and only the very rich. You have a chamber pot. It sits under the bed. It waits. And when it's full, you carry it gingerly downstairs out the door, to the shared privy or gutter, or if it's a good day, an actual cesspool. You tip, you rinse, you come back up the stairs, splashing slightly, and pretend the smell isn't following you. In summer, it's worse. The heat lifts every scent. The flies are thrilled. They multiply with a kind of optimism you can't help but admire. You swat, you curse, you hang sticky paper from the rafters and watch it fill, then replace it. Then repeat. Winter isn't better, just different. Frozen chamber pots, cracked skin, water that won't boil, and breath that fogs every window. You still sweat though, under your layers, into your socks, into your corset if you're wearing one, into the fabric that rarely gets washed because there's no time, no soap, no space to hang things, and nothing else to wear while you wait. So it lingers. Everything lingers. Your own body becomes a haunted house. You scratch. Everyone scratches. Lice are not a possibility. They're a population. You comb. You pick. You boil combs in vinegar. You wear your hair up. You cut it off. You cry. You get used to it. Same with fleas, bed bugs, ringworm, scabies. If you haven't had them, you know someone who has. If you don't know someone, it's because they're pretending. Because shame spreads faster than infection. You go to work. You try not to itch. You smell something. You hope it's not you. You start to learn that Victorian hygiene isn't just unpleasant. It's downright surreal. Take the water you drink. There's a river, you know, the Thames. Once it was a beautiful river, a lifeline flowing clean and clear. Now it's a sewer with aspirations, a giant flowing cesspit. And you drink from it. Because what else is there? The water smells like old fish and forgotten sins. It's thick with industrial runoff, human waste, and the occasional dead dog. If you're lucky, it carries cholera. If you're unlucky, dysentery. Both are thrilling diseases with dramatic symptoms and a death toll that climbs faster than the church bells can toll. You know someone who caught cholera last year? He was a young man, strong as a horse, and gone in 3 days. You wonder if it's your turn. Sometimes you boil the water. Sometimes you don't, because fuel is precious and firewood is scarce. So you drink it as it is, and wait. You're familiar with the taste of sickness before it sets in. Your gut churns. You sweat. You lie in bed listening to the clack of a chamber pot outside your door. You pray for mercy. Meanwhile, the streets are alive with rats, thousands of them. They skitter and squeak in the gutters. They climb over piles of rubbish and climb the walls of tenements as easily as cats. They share your home. They feast on your scraps. They gnaw on your toes when you sleep. They spread plague and fear and fleas. You see a rat the size of a cat once, and you swear you imagined it, but you didn't. Rats breed so fast that you might have 20 new neighbours by morning. You try traps, you try poison, you try yelling at them. Nothing works. They multiply like the city's invisible shadow. Lice are the crown jewel of Victorian horror. Not because they hurt much, because they are impossible to eradicate. You comb, you wash, you cut your hair short, you boil combs in vinegar and burn your clothes. You scream and scratch and cry. But they come back. Everywhere. On the backs of children. In the collars of coats. In the folds of curtains. They crawl, they bite, they thrive. Families live with them. They're accepted. Lice are a normal part of existence, like rain or fog or coal smoke. And if you complain, you're mocked, called filthy, called weak. Because you don't just live with lice. You are lice. And the thought clings to you longer than any itch. Then there are the toilets, the infamous privies, the cesspools, the cesspits. If you're lucky, you have a privy out back. A small wooden box with a hole in the seat and a bucket underneath. It smells like death and despair and something worse. The bucket is emptied by night soil men. Men who collect human waste by hand. Who walk the streets at night with buckets and carts. Who are both necessary and reviled. Their work smells worse than death. Their pay is worse than theft. They are ghosts. And you fear them. Because the night soil men carry disease. And you carry the knowledge that tomorrow it will be your turn to empty the bucket. Or your neighbour's. Or your child's. In winter, the privy freezes. The smell turns cold and sharp. You can't open the lid without breath catching in your throat. The flies retreat, but the rats do not. They lurk under the floorboards and chew at the pipes. You try to forget what's below, but the smell always finds a way upstairs, in the bedrooms, in the kitchen, in your dreams. There is no escape. You try to clean your clothes, you boil your linens, you scrub your socks until your fingers bleed, but the grime remains. On your skin, in your hair, in your soul. Soap is a luxury. Real soap, made of fat and lye, costs more than bread. Most use ash or chalk, or even urine. Yes, urine. Because urine contains ammonia, and ammonia is a cleaning agent. It's not pleasant. It smells worse than anything else, but it works better than water alone. You bathe with it. You wash your clothes with it. You soak your feet in it. You try not to think about what that means. The heat, the sweat, the filth. It all blends together. You can't separate yourself from the grime. The dirt becomes you. You breathe it in. You swallow it. You live in it. And it laughs. Because hygiene is a cruel joke. One played on the living, on the desperate, on those who have no choice. And the absurdity piles up. Chamber pots shared between families. Soap rationed like gold. Laundry hung in rooms filled with soot. Hair never washed. Beds never changed. And diseases that spread with the casual efficiency of clockwork. Typhus, cholera, smallpox, and worse. You watch neighbours fall ill. You see the lines deepen on faces. You hear the coughs in the night. You feel the cold fingers of death brush your shoulder. But you go on. Because there is no other way. Because you have no other choice. Because the horror is normal. And the absurd is survival. You lie in bed at night, in a room where sleep is never quiet. The air is too thick. Your sweat clings to the sheets like syrup. You shift. The mattress crunches beneath you. Not because of straw, but because it hasn't been cleaned in years, and you're not the first to sleep on it. Maybe not even the fifth. You try not to think about that, but you do. You always do. You've scratched your leg raw again. You didn't mean to. You were dreaming of running water and woke to blood beneath your nails. Somewhere on your scalp, something moves. You pretend it doesn't. You turn your face to the wall. Next to you, someone breathes heavy. Too heavy. Their lungs rattle like coins in a tin. You've heard that sound before. It doesn't mean they'll die, not tonight. But soon. And when they do, you'll have to drag the body out before the neighbours complain. You might get their boots, though, if they don't smell too bad. That's how hygiene works here. Not through health, through death. Nothing gets truly clean. Not the walls, not the floorboards, not the city, not you. You can scrub a table with lye until your knuckles split. Still, the rot remains. In the corners. In the cracks. Behind the wainscoting, where mushrooms grow in the damp. You once saw mould with teeth. You were half asleep, maybe. You tried to tell someone. They just nodded. Seen worse, they said. You believed them. The bathwater is grey now, opaque. The last person left a curl of hair floating in it. You pull it out and flick it onto the floor. You tell yourself that's good enough. You get in. The heat is gone. The chill bites. The surface clings to your skin like judgment. You smell yourself and can't tell if it's better or worse. You duck under. You count to 10. You emerge. It's done. That's bathing. You dry off with a blanket and hang your clothes back on your body. Still damp. Still wrinkled. Still stinking faintly of ash and old bread. You once heard a doctor say that people in your condition should avoid meat, that it causes bad humours. You remember this as you chew on a bit of beef gristle left over from a stew made 3 nights ago. You laugh. It surprises you. The laughter, more than the meat, makes you gag. You spit it out. Rinse your mouth with beer. It's flat, warm, and safer than water. You once thought hygiene meant looking nice, smelling nice, feeling fresh. Now it just means not being infected. Today. You're not sick. Not yet. That's what passes for success now. You once found a dead cat in the water pump. It had been there for days. No one had noticed. Or maybe they had. No one said anything. You drank the water anyway. Everyone did. Because what were you going to do? Be thirsty? Absurdity doesn't mean circus clowns and laughter. It means this. It means pulling lice off your baby while singing a lullaby. It means wiping your teeth with a soot rag and calling it a dental routine. It means sharing bath water with 5 people and calling that efficiency. It means trying to bleach your shirt with urine and praying no one smells you before they see you. It means a man selling soap on the street while his own hands are black with coal. It means buying lavender for the corpse in the next room because it's easier than explaining the smell to the landlord. It means your daughter wearing perfume made of whale vomit and roses to hide the scent of mildew. It means washing your hands before eating off a plate you haven't washed in 2 weeks. It means a man shouting about sanitation while he dumps a pot of excrement in the alley. It means a poster telling you to keep your home clean, nailed to a wall covered in piss. It means knowing everything is filthy and living in it anyway. You don't fight it. You can't. You just try to keep one part of you clean. A hand, a collar, a bit of lace at the neck. Something that says, I'm trying. Something that says, I remember what dignity looked like, even if it doesn't remember you. You once dreamt of a clean house. Now you dream of soap. Real soap. Big white chunks that don't smell like lies. You don't remember if you ever held one. But you dream. Because even filth can't take that from you. Not yet. You don't remember the last time you felt clean. Not just your body, yourself, your thoughts, the space behind your eyes. That quiet place where your mind used to stretch out and imagine. It feels smaller now. Folded. Damp. A cupboard where ideas used to grow and now just... Wait. There is no collapse in your life. Not a dramatic one anyway. No breaking point. No moment where everything explodes in tears and howling. Just a slow sinking, quiet, measured, respectable. Even your despair has manners. You wake, you dress, you work, you eat, you lie down, you do it again. Somewhere along the line, your heart stopped looking forward. It stopped wanting things. Or maybe it just forgot how. You used to dream of having your own place. A little cottage, perhaps. A stove that didn't smoke. A pot of tea that didn't run out. A door you could lock from the inside. Now your biggest dream is an uninterrupted night's sleep. One where no coughing wakes you. No feet beside your bed. No scratching under the walls. You begin to wonder If maybe you're already gone. If the part of you that felt has slipped out quietly, like steam through a window. You talk less. Your voice cracks when you do. You smile when you're supposed to, but your eyes stay still. You're tired, but not the kind that rest solves. It's in your bones now, in your breath, in the way your shoulders slope a little further each week, in the way you look at a clean cup of water and feel something close to reverence. You're not religious anymore. Not really. You still nod during sermons. Still say God willing when asked about tomorrow. But belief requires hope, and hope is too expensive. You once believed you were just passing through this stage. That cleanliness and comfort and dignity were waiting down the road just past the next corner. Now you understand. This is the road. It doesn't lead somewhere else. This is your life. The moment you accept that feels less like defeat and more like exhale. You stop fighting. Not because you give up, but because there's nothing left to resist. The filth? It's not the enemy. The smells? They're familiar. The sickness, the rot, the ache? They've become part of the rhythm. You've adapted. Like mould in the corners. Like fog against brick. You blend in. And that's the most terrifying part. That you've become invisible to yourself. You try to remember who you were once. Before the soot. Before the rules carved into your skin like scripture. You try to remember what made you you. A favourite colour? A song? A word? Nothing comes. Not clearly. Everything is foggy now. Blurred at the edges like old glass. You remember pain more than joy. Hunger more than laughter. Silence more than song. There's no room for introspection. That's a luxury of the clean, of the well-fed. You have no journal, no time. Your memories are loose threads caught on the teeth of routine. You speak less now, even to yourself. You used to narrate your days in your head, make jokes to pass the time, tell little stories about the people you passed in the street. Now you just move, like a cog, like a gear that forgot it used to turn something beautiful. Your body begins to ache in new places. Your back, your knees, your jaw clenched tight in your sleep. You tell no one. No one wants to hear it. Pain that isn't dramatic is invisible here. Everyone's in pain. It's impolite to mention it. You swallow it. You keep working. You count your coins at the end of the day and feel nothing. Not relief, not despair, just nothing. You hold them in your palm like bones from a fortune teller, waiting for them to whisper something useful. They don't. You watch a child laugh in the alley, and it feels like something from another world. Not wrong, just far. Like a memory that doesn't belong to you. You remember once laughing that hard. Maybe, you think, but you can't recall why. You begin to understand that silence is a symptom. Not just an absence of sound, but a sign that something has gone still inside you. Still and heavy. Like a door you used to open without thinking that now sticks. And you've stopped trying to pull. People speak around you. You nod. You reply when needed. You laugh when the rhythm suggests you should. But your mind doesn't move like it used to. It lags. Like your thoughts have to swim through something thick just to reach the surface. Some days you move through the market and realise, hours later, that you didn't see a single face. Not one. Just coats, baskets, boots. Like the whole world has become a blur, and you've faded into it. You still feel things. You know that. But they don't land properly. You hear of a neighbour's death, and you say, that's a shame. But it feels like reading a sentence from a story you've already forgotten. The body next door is removed in the early morning. wrapped in a sheet, carried down the steps by two men who say nothing. You look down from your window and think they moved like they'd done it 100 times. Then you realise they probably have. You remember when death used to scare you. Now it just feels like another kind of washing. A way to rinse someone out of the story. Neat, final, silent. You visit someone in hospital once. An aunt, maybe? The room smells like vinegar and soap. Two things you haven't associated with health in years. Her body is smaller than you remember. Her skin thin as tissue. She asks you how you are. You lie. She thanks you for coming. You say of course. You mean it. But you leave faster than you should. The clean air unsettles you. The white sheets make you nervous. You feel exposed around sterility. You tell yourself it's just habit. But deep down, you know, there's comfort in the grime. Not because you like it, but because it doesn't judge you. There's no shame in being dirty here. Not when everyone is. You wear your dust like camouflage, like proof you belong, like armour. Someone gave you a flower once, a real one, not crushed, not dried between pages. A small thing in a chipped jar, handed to you like it mattered. You kept it on the windowsill until it wilted. You watched it sag, brown at the edges, leaning away from the light. You felt more connection to that flower than you've felt with most people. Not because it was beautiful, but because it didn't last. You understood it. You sometimes walk past shops in the better parts of the city, glass-fronted, with brass fixtures and clean windows. Inside, neat rows of soap, fine combs, ribbons, lavender sachets. You look at those items the way someone might look at stars. Beautiful, distant, untouchable. You imagine what it would feel like to be the kind of person who shops there, the kind who washes daily, who owns towels with embroidery, who lights candles for scent, not smoke. You imagine them coming home to a room that doesn't stink of damp. You imagine them brushing their hair without pulling knots from their scalp. You imagine them touching things without thinking of disease. You imagine them kissing without the smell of fear on their breath. And for a moment, just a flicker, you hate them. Not because they have more, but because they don't know. They don't know what it's like to dig a nail under your skin and wonder if that's a bite or a boil. They don't know the sound of coughing that won't stop, even in sleep. They don't know the shame of pretending not to smell your own body in a room full of strangers. They don't know what it is to be erased by dirt, to become a walking symptom, a rumour of a person. They don't know, and they never will. And then that moment of hate passes, because you don't have energy for hate anymore. You barely have energy for breath. You still feel hunger. That never leaves. But it's quieter now, less urgent, less sharp. It hums in the background, like everything else. You eat what you're given. You chew slowly. You taste salt, maybe. Or bitterness. You don't remember what sweetness tastes like. Not real sweetness. Not the kind that lingers. You once had an orange, years ago. You still think about that orange. Its brightness. The way it cut through the air. The juice that ran down your chin and made your fingers sticky. You think about that more than you think about birthdays. You sit alone sometimes. On a bench. On a step. In a stairwell. You don't look like you're doing anything. You might be holding a rag, or a cup, or nothing at all. But you are being, not thinking, not resting, just being. Because even that feels rare now. When someone walks past you, you nod. Politely. Automatically. They nod back. You both look tired. You both look like you've forgotten what year it is, and in that moment you feel more connection than you do at most gatherings. Because what binds you isn't family. It isn't joy. It's the shared weight of trying to stay here. That's what emotional collapse looks like in the Victorian world. Not madness, not hysteria, not breakdowns. It's not wailing in the street or clawing at your face. It's whispering, "I'm fine," without thinking. It's standing in line for water and not noticing the smell. It's watching a funeral pass and wondering if the black lace will be reused. It's washing your hands and not expecting clean. It's living 1,000 little deaths before your own, and still waking up the next morning. You begin to move through the world like a ghost. Not the tragic, howling kind. Just unnoticed. Ungreeted. Passed through. People don't really look at you anymore. Or maybe they do, and you've just stopped looking back. It doesn't hurt. That's the strangest part. It should hurt. It used to. The way someone's eyes might slide over you. The way your words are met with silence. The way your hands are refused when reaching for help. But now it's just another thing. Like sore feet. Like soot on the windowsill. Like a bad tooth you've learned to chew around. You once imagined the worst thing that could happen to you was to die alone. But now you understand, the real fear is being alive and alone. Completely surrounded and still unseen. You find yourself speaking less and less. Even when there's someone beside you. You forget to say goodnight. You forget to say thank you. Not out of rudeness, just forgetfulness. Like the language is slipping away from you, one word at a time. You think in shorter phrases now? Fewer adjectives, more instructions. Carry this, boil that. Don't forget. Don't speak, don't need. You find an old book in the rubbish heap once. Its cover torn, pages browned with damp. You bring it home. Not because you plan to read it, but because it feels like a memory of reading, of sitting still, of leisure. You turn a few pages. You see words like garden and light and perfume, and they feel like lies. You try to imagine what perfume really smells like. Not rose water mixed with vinegar. Not lavender soap rubbed between calloused fingers. Perfume. You can't. You close the book. You keep it anyway. You put it by the bed, like a charm. A relic from another version of the world. Or another version of you. And sometimes, when you wake in the dark, you reach for it. Not to read, just to touch. To remind yourself you still have hands. You see a mirror once. Real glass, not the warped metal shard in your room. It's in a shop window, polished, hung just right. And for a moment, you glimpse yourself. You don't recognise the face. It's not shock. It's more like confusion. The lines are deeper. The mouth is set, the shoulders stooped. The eyes look like they've been watching too long and not blinking enough. You tilt your head, so does the stranger, and then you look away. Because it's easier. Because sometimes recognition feels like grief. And grief requires energy. And you've spent all yours on just standing upright. You don't tell people when things hurt anymore. Your hands, your teeth, your heart. You just adjust. Shift the load. Favour the side that stings less. Hope the ache dulls before it worsens. Because there are no doctors for the likes of you. Just whispers. Remedies. Rags soaked in vinegar. The kind of medicine that stinks more than it heals. You once knew a girl who lost her finger to an infection. From a sewing needle, just a prick. She waited too long, no money for help. By the time they cut it off, it was black. She never sewed again. Her hand shook when she tried. You think about her sometimes when your own finger throbs. You wrap it tight and don't look too closely. You keep working, you keep quiet, you breathe. And sometimes, just sometimes, there's something strange. Not happiness, not hope. Just a pause. In the middle of scrubbing a floor, or folding a shirt, or standing by the stove. A moment where time slows and the noise pulls back, and you notice something. A shaft of light across the table, the way steam curls from a cup, the tiny sound of a sparrow outside fighting the wind. These are not joyful moments, but they're not empty. They exist. They make space. And in that space, you remember that there is a you. Not much. Faded, yes. Bruised, bent, diminished. But there. A you that watches, even if she doesn't speak. A you that listens, even if no one answers. A you that wakes up each day and moves through a world not built for her. A you who, somehow, in all this filth, has not disappeared. And that's the strange miracle, isn't it? That even now, after all this, you're still here, still breathing, still aching, still folding clothes, still brushing hair, still watching the light shift across the wall and thinking, I'm still here. Not because you fought, not because you triumphed, but because you didn't vanish. Because the system tried to reduce you to routine, to silence, to flesh and labour and nothing more. But somewhere inside all that dust and bone, something endured. Something that knew its own name, even when you forgot how to say it. And you hold that. You don't name it. You don't speak it. You just carry it like a candle in a room with no windows. And no matter how faint the flame, it's still burning. You lie still now. The room hasn't changed, but something has. The air settles, the sounds stretch. The walls feel wider, like they've been listening. There's no lesson waiting, no triumph, no escape. Just breath, just silence. Just the soft, steady presence of a life that persisted in filth, in stillness, in every forgotten corner. Let the soot stay on your skin. Let the water run cold. Let the candle burn low. Sleep, if you can, or don't. Either way, you made it to morning.